Okay, so Westborough TV, is somebody on from Westborough TV? You want me to give you the 5 seconds, Karen? Okay, so Westborough TV, is somebody on from Westborough TV? It's your moment in the sun. So that was Karen Henderson from Westborough TV. 5 seconds, Karen?
Live and in person here.
Okay, so anyways, welcome to the Westborough Board of Selectmen meeting. It's your moment in the sun.
For Tuesday, June 9th, 2020.
Live and in person.
And the first agenda item on our meeting will be our joint meeting with the Board of Health.
And time is 6:30. I just received a call from Paula Morgan. She lives off of 16 Sampson Street.
Chief Lori, I think your microphone is on.
Chief, I muted you.
Okay. So we'll be going to that, and then we will, after we do that session, the Board of Health adjourns their meeting. We'll go into the other items that are on the agenda that was posted for the Board of Selectmen tonight. So as we kick off the meeting, I'd just like to say the regular statement that we've done at every meeting, which is pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Town of Westborough Board of Selectmen and Board of Health is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to view this meeting while in progress may do so by turning to Westborough TV's government channels, which is Verizon Channel 28 and Charter 192. It's also streaming online at westboroughTV.org on their live stream government page. So thank you for that, and welcome everybody. As is typical with these joint meetings, for those that have been watching all along, what I'd like to do is turn it over to the chair of the Board of Health to kind of kick off the agenda for the joint meeting, if Dr. Walsh, you're okay with that.
Yes, Ann. Thank you, Ian. I appreciate that. So we'd like to give a little bit of an update as to where we are as a town in terms of COVID-19 and where things stand. I think the other things on the agenda that I'm aware of right now is that Jen Kirkland has some stuff about the rec department and playgrounds. And we have a fair bit to discuss with the town meeting, as I think we're ready to give some feedback to the selectmen to move us to the next stage of planning there. And I don't know if there's anything else specifically related to the being in phase 2. I think this is day 2 of the Massachusetts phase 2, and so we'll probably have a few comments about that as well. And then and obviously any questions the Board of Selectmen has, or Christy or anybody else that wants to ask, we can flow right into that. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Steve, if you can just kind of update the Board of Health and the Board of Selectmen about what's happened in the past few days in terms of cases.
Sure. Well, thank you, Nathan. So this will be kind of quick. We've had 3 new cases since Friday, which brings us to a total of 362, 3 more than on Friday, and no deaths that I know of. The 2 long-term care facilities here in town have reported to me that one of them is totally COVID-free. That includes staff and residents. Of course, this is as of right now. That could change tomorrow. So I just want to not to throw water on the fire, that type of thing. And the other one has 1 asymptomatic person that they're still monitoring, but besides that, they are COVID-free. So that is good news. As far as, and of course, that can change, but that's where we're at right now.
Excellent.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, we're just working with the facilities that can open in the first part of phase 2. Obviously, I think people have seen outdoor seating is progressing in some of the restaurants. If you've driven around town, you've probably seen tents and barricades and things like that, where we're actively working with that, as is Jeff and Chief Lori and the other town departments. So that seems to be going pretty good so far.
So besides the outdoor seating at restaurants, I guess the long-term care facilities and assisted living, they're now allowing family members to visit outdoors as well, I believe. Is that correct?
It's allowed. I tell you the truth, Nathan, I have not talked to them about whether they're actually doing it yet, but
Okay.
I did see that there was guidance for that. That's allowed. I think it's maybe 2 family members and social distancing, but
Yep.
I am not well versed in it as of yet, so I don't want to say too much.
Okay, good. Let's see, before we move on to anything else, Alan, do you have, I see Lee with her hand up. I just wanted to give Alan a chance to comment. He usually provides some context for the numbers, although I think the numbers are actually looking pretty good.
So the context I have would be as follows. The numbers clearly are improving. You look at the graphs from Massachusetts, both in cases and deaths. They are showing good progress on the right-hand side of a bell curve, or some bellish shaped curve. The caveat I would put out there is that we do know that looking at some other parts of the country that have opened up earlier than we have, there has been an uptick in cases in a number of these states. We don't know if that's going to lead to more deaths or whether it's the result simply of more testing, and so they're finding more mild cases. That remains to be determined, but that's some of the information we're going to be monitoring because these other states are a week or two ahead of us in much of this respect. Some are further ahead of us. So I just wanted to put that out there. I know people may have seen stuff like that in the media. We don't really know what this means. And of course, obviously over the last week or longer, there've been a lot of protests, not all with proper social distancing as it might be ideal, and whether that makes a difference on an uptick in cases either locally or nationally remains to be seen.
Thank you. So Lee, I think you had a question, and then Syed wanted
Yeah, just
to.
a quick question on the people being able to visit the long-term care facilities now. Is that because of a state, change, or is it Westborough? State.
No, that's state guidance that came out from the state. I'll probably be wrong on this, but it was at least a week ago, I think.
Oh, wonderful.
That can be found on DPH's website. So
Thank you.
again, yes.
That's great.
Yeah. It's really difficult for the people in the long-term care facilities. They really have been isolated and haven't had a lot of contact with people. They still aren't allowed to do things like, communal meals and bingo and that sort of thing. And so the state is looking at how and when to relax some of those other restrictions. But in terms of, outdoor contact with a few family members at a time with social distancing and masks, that is starting to be allowed. Syed, you had a question or a statement?
Yes. So because this is, sorry, I know we're going to be talking about the town meeting, so I didn't want to forget something that I had raised a couple of weeks earlier. And since this is a discussion to discuss impacts and to establish processes, that's part of the agenda item. One of my concerns is, and I don't know if Steve or Christy can speak to this, is, the schools are going to be closing. So what is going to be happening to the meals that they were providing to low-income students? Are those meals going away? Are they continuing? Can someone give us some information as to
Yes.
what's going on?
Yes, we can. Shelby or I can. That's going to be turned over to the food pantry. That entire district.
They're not going to get warm meals? Are they going to be getting?
They didn't get warm meals before, so they got lunch bags.
Okay.
Okay. So Amber and Phil are working very arduously on that, and I think the YMCA is also going to be helping with distribution. Shelby, do you have anything to add from our meeting about that from yesterday, maybe?
No, I would just recognize that the next couple of weeks are a transition period as the schools work with the food pantry to make that happen. And those conversations are, I would say, top of the list for the task force. And the work continues there to make sure that we're taking care of all those folks and no one's being left out. In fact, I would say more are being added to inclusion in that service than anything. And I see Alan Edinburgh is also waving his hand.
Yes.
Yeah, there's been a pretty concerted effort to transition everyone to the food pantry. as well as to, and that process has started, and the food pantry has started providing food to the members of that community, as well as to assist the food pantry in making sure it's able to stock foods that meet some of the dietary preferences and requirements of the different cultures in town, and diversifying the inventory at the food pantry to meet those needs as well.
But and I don't know if we don't need to discuss it. I don't want to take up too much time. We have a busy meeting agenda, but I would just like to know if there's some mechanism. One of my concerns, and again, I forgive my ignorance. I was hoping, I was under the impression, perhaps mistakenly, that the children were getting fresh, quote unquote, fresh food from the schools, and I'm just concerned that as we transition potentially to the food pantry, would they still be getting fresh food, or would that be more processed food?
Yes. So Syed, this is Shelby. What I would say is that the schools first of all, fresh food is very much part of what the food pantry provides. So as they're transitioning from gift cards and they're reopening, their fresh food distribution will increase, and those families, inclusive of students that are receiving support from the schools through that program, again, will be transitioned. So it will be a fresh food. And the other thing I would add is that there's also awareness that there are different cultural dietary interests that maybe traditionally the food pantry hasn't stocked. So that's also at the forefront of our conversations to understand, there's no sense in giving someone, for example, I don't know, a can of beans and, white flour if they really want cornmeal and something else, and jalapenos. I don't know. Phil and the team at the food pantry has always done a great job of allowing people to go in and, if you will, shop and browse for the food. And as they open back up with precautions, they intend to do that, and with the input of our superintendent and her team, very much aware of the dietary needs and interests of folks. That's a whole collaborative process. So that's sort of a very long-winded answer to your question, but I think that those real concerns that you have and questions are being met at a granular level of detail.
Right. And there are, in addition to sending information to these families by U.S. mail, members of the school administration and staff, volunteers from the food pantry and others have been hand delivering the packets of information in multiple languages to these, to these families and these members of the community to help them make the transition and make sure that they don't get left behind, even if there's a language or cultural differences, that they are included in the program.
So Nathan, I'm just wondering. So thank you. I was just wondering, is it worth we're going to be meeting, I believe, next Tuesday, Nathan. So I just leave it to you and Steve to decide if it's worth maybe adding this to our agenda, just to allow the food pantry or the schools to explain. I'm grateful for all this effort. I just don't want anyone left behind. I guess,
Dr. Hashmi, I would suggest, sort of part of the reason I think we're answering the way we are is that there's a high sensitivity to the privacy and the dignity of these members of the community and the families. It might be worthwhile for you to reach out to Mr. Kittredge at the food pantry or Superintendent Bach, who could share more details of the program without having publicly to go into information that might make some of the clients uncomfortable or feel that they weren't being treated with dignity and respect.
No, I think that's well said, Alan. Thank you.
Yeah, Nathan, also I would just chime in that, while I think this is an important subject, traditionally this has been not something the Board of Health has focused on. I don't know that we necessarily are aware of all that's being done, and so I would try to defer to the groups, whether it be the Board of Selectmen or whomever, who are already engaged with this obviously the school committee. So said I would hope we could work through those agencies rather than trying to recreate something ourselves and focus on this if there are other people already attuned to it.
Yeah, I just add one thing, Syed, and that's that if you were getting direct complaints from people in town about how it's run or how they're, getting services or would like to get services that are different than the way they are, that's something that I think if you wanted to bring up next week, we could. But I think if you're just responding to a concern of your own, that you're just hoping that things are working smoothly, I think we have to trust the people in the food pantry that are actually running this stuff, that they've actually already taken into account a lot of these questions.
And just one final comment on the issue of food insecurity. For anyone who's watching us live or listening to the recording, if you or anyone you know knows someone who, because of their change in their financial situation, is concerned about not being able to have enough food for their family, in addition to our COVID-19 hotline, in the website, on the mass.gov website, there's a link to Project Bread's food hotline, which is coordinating a statewide effort. There are expanded benefits available from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP program, that provides debit cards for families to buy food throughout the Commonwealth. And so that program has been expanded. So people, even if your loss of income is temporary, Project Bread has volunteers, and with full translation services, I forget, well over a dozen languages, I believe, who will handhold and walk people through the application process. And if they qualify, we'll make sure that they get their benefits in a timely manner. And
Thank
so
you.
that resource is available to anyone who is facing food insecurity.
Thank you. Well, we're on the topic of volunteers, and Shelby's there. We're talking about the COVID-19 task force. I continually get asked questions. How can I help volunteer? Are you guys looking actively for volunteers? Are there places where I can send people?
So presently, no. Obviously, everyone's been very cautious about where and how volunteers are asked to help. But if folks are interested, I would have them contact the information resource line that Sela has been managing for the town, and submit their name and what they might be interested in doing, because again, we don't know, but I'm sure that there will be an opportunity along the way, and we just don't know. But thank you, Dr. Walsh.
Thank you. So if there's nothing more about that, I was hoping we could have an update from Jen. I think she had something about the playgrounds, and then we'll actually tackle the town meeting if that works for everybody. I see some nodding. So yeah, why don't we go ahead and do that? So Jen, did you have something that you want to update us on?
Yep. So I just wanted to let everybody know we were planning on opening our fields and playgrounds on Monday the 15th. They're allowed to be open per the state as part of the phase 2. Just a couple of things. First, on fields, our fields are permitted by us. We're essentially like landlords to groups that use them. Right now, teams can only be practicing. It's very specific. I won't get into all of the details, but I know it's very specific. But I'm just wondering two things. If people fill out a permit to use our fields and signs off that the town's not liable for anything that might happen while a Little League game is going on, do you think it's worth them signing something that says that they understand guidelines that they need to be following, and that they're, prepared to do all the things that they need to do? And I don't know if that maybe is more of a insurance or town council question.
No, I mean, I agree that there's a certain amount of stuff that if you want to organize something on a town field, that you have to actually do a little bit of research to figure out what you're actually allowed to do on the field itself. Mm-hmm. And whether the research is looking at some of the, phase 2 reopening orders, or, talking to someone in the Board of Health, but having them kind of self-educate what they're allowed to do, I think personally makes sense. And so having that seems reasonable to me. Alan, you?
Yeah, so Jen, I want to ask you, I mean, there's two separate things here. One, which Nathan is suggesting, which certainly is a good idea, which is, providing the information, making sure people can readily understand when they're signing up and they're, filling out whatever forms and releases, that all the steps necessary to take that we would like them to take are, there so people know about that. I think the thing that you're alluding to, though, is something I've seen in a number of instances coming from the state over the last, or various forms over the last couple of weeks. And that is that it's not enough for someone to say, okay, we're going to do this. There's a separate attestation. And I'm not sure what that achieves. If there's a specific legal benefit to it, okay, I'd be willing to consider that. Otherwise, again, if people are going to ignore it, the fact that they've said they're going to follow it, I'm not sure it makes them more likely to do so. So I would want to know more about what's the rationale for some type of attestation like that, other than to make us feel good.
So is a business owner who's had to not only do an attestation, but a documented COVID-19 control plan per the state guidelines. It's all about risk mitigation. And so a business that makes an attestation and doesn't honor it and doesn't honor their COVID-19 plan, you're creating a liability that would let your workers' comp insurance deny claims and transfer the liability to the business. You open yourself up to civil litigation as well. And so there are consequences for falsely stating that you're following the rules and not, doing your commercially reasonable effort to follow them. I think with respect to use of the fields, it would also be fair to ask, I know there are different types of organizations, some informal and some very formal, like Little League baseball and softball. So Little League baseball and softball nationally and at the state level have published their own guidelines for what's expected of coaches, managers, players, player families, that when the children are being enrolled right now for hopefully what might be a season this summer, that everyone involved has to agree to. And so I think it might be good to ask those more organized, more formal organizations for a copy of what everyone's agreeing to, and just doing a quick check to make sure it's at least as protective as what we as a town want to see happen. I think that can save a lot of headache for, I'm not sure how you deal with some of the leagues that are, locally run and, don't have a national governing body that's providing this type of guidance.
Or even worse, they could be, something through the school itself, whether it be a football team or, a soccer team or something like that, that's actually, run by the school department.
Right. But the school also has guidelines now coming from the State Department of Education about COVID-19 protection and all sorts of activities, from, how do you run a band where people are blowing air through instruments to the athletic activities. So I would suspect that as the school develops their plans, they would be able to provide a copy of the plans and what protections they would take, not only for games, but for practices of the athletes.
So as far as
using town fields,
should she be requiring that they have these forms already made up and that they give a copy as part of the process to get permitting? Or are we just saying that we'll ask them, and if they have them, then we'll get them?
Well, I think the school and, Little League, which is, part of a national organization, will have policies and procedures that have been given to them that they have to follow. I don't know if that's the case for the cricket league or the men's softball, the adult male softball league.
So one thing, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I think if the organization has it, we should get a copy. If they don't, we should set the expectation and they should agree to it.
I think, yeah, and that Little League has already sent me theirs. Like you said, they got theirs from the bigger national Little League organizations. So that's not, and I really think at this point, because of all the restrictions, it's really only going to be a Little League that's going to be able to be out there, because it says specifically you cannot have any games, tournaments, or anything like that. So cricket, I talked to men's softball. I said they don't practice, so they're just looking for games, which they can't do now. So I think it would just be Little League. So this might be, I just didn't know if you wanted them to sign off on something saying, yep, this is what we're doing and we're planning to do it. And then as we get into phase 3, we can kind of talk, if they do allow games, that's when the adult groups who are less organized, this might come into play.
Yeah, and the actual guidance actually is right now only allowed for youth under 18 years of age. So even if adult softball league wanted to go out there and practice, even adhering to the guidelines, right now it's phase 2, only youths under 18 years of age, groups of fewer than 10. So adults groups can't do it right now anyways.
I think in the long run, we should ask our town council, does it benefit us to actually get signed agreements or not? And it might be a question the Board of Health and the Rec Department would put to town council through Christie.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a question from town council, but also of our insurance company. So.
Good. Syed or Ellen, do you guys have anything else about this, or do you have more stuff, Jen?
So the other part of that, Little League wanted to ask, I don't think they knew you guys met weekly, but they almost wanted to get sort of an okay that they could, if phase 3 allows for games, that everyone would be fine with them starting games. I said that might have to come a little bit further down the road when we see phase 3 guidelines, because I haven't seen anything specific. It's very vague. It just says social distancing may be adjusted. So he wanted me to ask that at this meeting, but I don't know if he was aware that you guys meet weekly. That'd be easy enough for me to just pop on as when we see phase 3.
Yeah, I think it is too early for us to say how
Sure.
we're going to roll out phase 3.
Yeah.
I think that we still have the phase 2.5 or whatever it is that's coming up that we still have to figure out details for.
I like that 2.5.
So yeah, I think that we also have to see whether cases start going back up or not too,
Sure.
because that may very well affect how we want to roll this out too in terms of social distancing. Lee, did you have a question?
Yes, I noticed some people playing on the tennis field at the high school the other day. Is that open now?
I don't know what the school has done. I think that they are open. I would assume that they were. I hadn't heard specifically.
Yeah, they're open.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so Little League is fine we can open our fields with phase 2 as long as they follow all the guidelines. And then playgrounds, this is I've been talking to other towns as well. People are opening. Southborough, I kind of followed their model of they're posting that their playgrounds are open, but they aren't sanitizing and disinfecting them. Kind of use at your own risk. There'll be signage of, make sure you're social distancing. If there's more than 10 people on the playground, wait or come back later. So I just wanted to make sure that we were all comfortable with that plan.
Does the social distancing apply to groups when you're outside of groups of 10? I think it's close contact, right? Like inside.
Yeah, so I think that the rules that I've been hearing have generally been, so like if you're at the beach or something like that, you don't look at the whole beach and say you can't have 10 people at the beach, but they're talking about kind of groups that might be congregating together. With a playground with really young kids, though, I think you're going to run into other issues that are different, where you're actually going to get a lot of kids that just kind of don't know how to maintain 6 feet apart. So I think anything we can do there to help just limit the crowding at these places is going to help. So I'm fine with trying to keep it to 10 people on a playground. I'm not aware of any of the playgrounds in town that are really massive where you might be able to fit a lot more than that on there, but the ones that come to mind for me, 10 people sound pretty reasonable.
Dr. Wells, this is Shelby. I think that there could be at least 10 children on any number of our playgrounds. So I guess I think we need to be really clear. We're saying only 10 at a time. That seems, I guess, in an outside environment, is that part of the guidelines? I thought there could be more outside.
Yeah, so I mean, you're right that as far as the guidelines from the state, when you're outdoors in a non-enclosed environment, I don't believe that that there's a 10-person limit. So what we'd be talking about here in town is for our playgrounds with little kids that might not be able to maintain 6 feet of distance? Do we want to have anything about how we're opening our playgrounds? And so we're discussing whether we want something that sounds like more stringent than what the state might allow. The state, it seems like, are requiring that kids, everybody maintain 6 feet of distance, though. It might be hard to enforce that.
So I would say, you're understating things, Nathan. If you open the playgrounds to kids, the idea of social distancing goes out the window. Okay. I mean, I think you just have to accept that. So either we keep the playgrounds closed, or we are saying, as I think someone said, use them at your own risk and judge your risk tolerance, and see what happens. We do know transmission is less likely in an outdoor environment. We know that children as a whole are less likely to have severe disease, but they can obviously transmit it to others in their household, and people will have to use judgment. Part of this is seeing, do we see an uptick in cases? So far as we, finished phase 1, and you hear what Steve said at the beginning, there's really been no material, the cases continue to decline significantly. And so I really think we either open the playgrounds and maybe post some warnings that encourage people for social distancing, but it can't be something that we're being naive about. I've seen kids in my neighborhood, and the adults are fairly good at social distancing. And once the kids get together and they're off on their bikes, they do whatever they want.
Nathan and Dr. Ehrlich, I appreciate what you said, Dr. Ehrlich, because this is the one. Is if we try to mandate this, we are going to get overwhelmed with calls, because people will call in and say, this is what you mandated and it's not happening. And then we put our resources on monitoring playgrounds, et cetera. So I do like the idea that I personally think that they should be open, but I think putting the signs and encouraging, and also noting that we are not, as a town, sanitizing them. I think putting all that stuff that Jen mentioned at the beginning, I think makes sense. But agree that trying to mandate social distancing is just not.
Do we have a somewhat cheap, effective way of making and posting signs? Obviously, this kind of, to talk about, oh yeah, well, we should just post a sign. We talk about every single playground we have, and every time we change the rules a little bit, I'm concerned that we're keeping the sign makers in, tons of money.
Well, I just use our laminator and use bright colored paper and post them. That's what I did for the tennis courts, because the signs, like making a metal sign can get costly unless we knew this was what we were going to say forever. But I just use our laminator, and it's worked out fine. So I'm fine to do that.
The town's also tracking all of our COVID-19 expenses for future reimbursement grants. So if any department needed to purchase actual signs, that would go toward a COVID line item.
Okay. So at this point, we're looking at, Alan, did you have?
Yeah, I have one more thing to say, which is getting back to, the whole notion of what we were trying to do in the first place when we started meeting a couple of months ago. And that notion was, we're going to try and flatten the curve. And it wasn't strictly that no one will ever get infected, but the number of people who get infected, if we spread it out over a large enough time frame, then we won't overwhelm our healthcare system. And Governor Baker has been making it clear in his daily meetings that the resources being used, number of patients hospitalized and things like this, are decreasing week after week. And so my feeling is that the idea of, okay, let's open the playgrounds and see what happens, while there is some risk to that, it's also reasonable for those who wish to, expose themselves in that fashion. I think it's not going, because the cases have been declining in town, we will have ample time to react, and we can obviously rescind that if we see that that's a problem. So
no, I think what you said sounds perfectly reasonable. Would we be willing as a Board of Health to recommend that people choose not to use the park if it's crowded? We could have a warning on there saying that we're not, sanitizing the playground, use at your own risk, that the playground is open. But I'm wondering whether we feel comfortable adding some extra language on there that the Board of Health recommends. Certain.
I actually would. Steve, looks like you want to say something, but
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I think we can work with Jen on language. I would put caveats of people who have weakened immune systems for whatever reason would probably be best not to be in this environment. We can put in those kinds of warnings. People who are at increased risk through either age or comorbidities, and we can list what some of the ones that people should think twice about. So I do think having a little more than just a perfunctory sign would be helpful, one that educates, but I think we can work with Jen to do that.
Yeah, I think it's really good to be realistic, though, about what we expect kids at a playground to be doing. And while we can encourage social distancing or we could encourage masks, I think we do have to realize that that is going to be happening. There will be kids without masks that don't maintain social distance, and we don't want everybody calling up complaining that your sign says one thing and yet you're tolerating another. So yeah, if we work with Jen on the language, I think that'll be helpful.
Awesome. Thanks so much. That's all I have.
Steve, were you going to say something?
Well, I have the, not the full on stuff, but I have the actual safety standards from the state here about what, the wording, and I think this probably would actually satisfy what you're looking for. It says right in here, if the facility is unstaffed, parents and guardians will be required to seek alternate facilities if the playground is crowded such that social distancing cannot be maintained. So something to that effect. It's right in the standards here. So we can put that wording on there or something to that effect.
That sounds good.
Thanks.
Excellent. So I think that maybe now we should turn toward town meeting to keep things moving along. Is there anything else that, I don't see anything else. So good. So John, I'm going to hand it over to you. I think you and Wendy have done quite a bit of work in terms of drafting some stuff. And I think it'd be nice to hear from you guys.
Yeah, and you did too, Nathan. So anyway, so I don't want to spend a lot of time rehashing stuff. A small group of us went to the high school to do a sort of a virtual walkthrough and to look for possible places where there could be problems and look for solutions. And we forwarded along 2 sort of early draft documents just to motivate the discussion. Nathan was nice enough to sort of do the math and do a map of what we think town meeting capacity in some various rooms in the high school would be. And then based on notes and comments of the group, I wrote up sort of a step-by-step process narrative of how things could work. I'll just do because I know not everyone who's on the call and people at home haven't seen that. But essentially the idea would be to, assuming the weather is tolerable, people would wait in a socially distanced line on the ramp going from the door where we normally enter at the top floor of the high school. Instead, go down the ramp and check in a foyer that's down on the main floor where the main entrance to the auditorium and the gymnasium and some classrooms are. They would essentially wait at the door and be called and go to 2, 3, or however many check-in stations that the town clerk provides. They would then be given a paper ballot that will be hopefully easily recognized and quickly counted if necessary. And the idea would be to have for people either because of age or health problems need the armrests and the padded chairs. We believe that the auditorium can hold between 56 and 90 people, each sitting at least 6 feet apart. So the people with either the elderly or people with medical conditions would get first choice there. Almost everyone else would essentially be told to go to the large Fisher gym, which according to Nathan's measurements, could hold 182 household units, where we believe most household units would probably be between 1 and 3, but if we had to, we could accommodate 4 in some. And then based on various guidance that I've heard from listening in to Mass Municipal Association and some of the lawyers, there's been discussion that because of voting rights, we can't necessarily require that people wear masks, but the idea would be to set up a small classroom, or if we think there are going to be more than would fit in the small classroom, perhaps set up the library and have a third room for people who would still be required to be distanced apart, but for people who wouldn't want to wear masks. And other than that, everyone in the auditorium and the gym would be expected to wear masks unless they were given permission. We're talking about, so this is a multi-room town meeting, similar to when we had the large crowd for the high school lights. We would just potentially get a third room involved, and trying to prevent people from us having to constantly wipe down microphones. The idea would be to have boom microphones where the microphone would be, angled up at like 8 or 9 feet, and have the person stand under it and have the AV people make it so they could address the meeting without having to touch the microphone. For people who can't necessarily stand and walk to a microphone, the idea would be to give out note cards and maybe disposable golf pencils. Somebody could raise their hand, be recognized, and write down their question, and somebody could bring it to me, and I could identify the voter and read it. And then the other thing would be almost sort of like your typical, wedding type thing, where to prevent too many people from having to walk by other people, we would essentially have the entrances to the room are pretty much from the back, and we're hoping to get some volunteers, maybe student council or honor society, to essentially lead people to the frontmost seat. So essentially, people who come in later wouldn't have to walk by people who've been seating. And I'm sure there's lots of other details in the plan too, but the idea was essentially, and there's also, although the gymnasium does not have doors that open directly outside, there are 2 doors that open to a stairwell that does have a door outside. And in our discussions with the school people, they have put up fans and essentially kept the doors open and tried to blow fresh air in one way and fresh air out the other to keep air moving. And the good news is that if it turns out that it's an overcast, dull day, the lights in the gym are now all LED, so we could turn the lights on without generating more heat. There's lots of other details that, again, I'm leaving it to the Board of Health to sort of make the call of whether this is sufficiently safe. What we were trying to do was come up with identifying possible problems and possible solutions, so we can discuss where the pain points are, where we think improvements would need to be made. So the hope would be that we get a sense tonight of if it's worth still pursuing, so we can turn on, all the various organizations in town that have to get ready for a town meeting, and then just keep tabs as we approach 2 Saturdays from now. So I'll stop with that because I've already gone on too long.
Thank you, John. So yeah, my take on it was that I think that the plan that John came up with can be done safely. I think that my biggest concern is what happens if we had record crowd turnout, and I think that might have to be that if we reach capacity, we may have to try to continue the town meeting or postpone it to a different day. I don't think that's likely to happen, but obviously that's my biggest fear. I don't know, Syed or Alan, I think you, Syed, had some questions you wanted to ask.
Yeah, so first I wanted to thank John, Wendy, and you and the rest of for all the hard work that they did. And John, I had 2 questions for you. One, I thought, and Christy may also have seen this, I thought we got an email from our legislators stating that you could have virtual town meetings. Is that on the table? Not on the table?
That's only allowed for representative town meeting.
Oh, shoot. So it can't be done for us, right?
No, and when you think of the digital divide and elderly people who don't necessarily have, internet or computers, there are a large number of problems for virtual town meetings to be done at an open town meeting in terms of preventing voter fairness. So yes.
Okay, so and the second question is, and again, I'm sure you probably already know this, I guess there's a town moderator, I think in Acton or something, that has like this app that allows you to measure.
Actually, that was North Andover. An interesting thing is I actually helped him solve a math problem with that. So yeah, so there's a town moderator in I believe it's North Andover who and I can share the link later. And essentially, it's just a highly theoretical. Not taking a lot of things in terms of given a number of people you want, and giving that if each person stood in the center of a square, and if you had essentially, imagine standing in the center of a square or a circle, where you had 3 feet all around you. So, and then each person's the edge of their circle, the 3 feet would reach and it'd be 6 feet apart. And then there's a sort of a slop factor for just, wasted space or whatever. And actually I had pulled that website up. just to see how it would turn out. And so with a minimum space of between people of 6 feet, and then an additional sort of fudge factor of 20%, let's say we wanted to put 225 people in a room. This sort of idealized, fitting model essentially would require a minimum area of just over 9,000 square feet and a practical minimum area of just over 11,000 square feet. And the reason why this is interesting is that the high school gym, although there's some bleachers that take up a little space, the area of the large gym is 11,000 square feet. So the 11,000 is right between in there, and that's with the 225 people sitting individually. But as I looked at this, the chart that Nathan did, where essentially we really only have like 114 boxes, but we assume that some cases, some either family units or husband, wives, or however you want to describe them, could fit in each of those. It looks like the imagining that we can fit the 150 to 200 people in that room seems reasonable, and it matches these guidelines. And then assuming that we have some overflow into the auditorium or the quote no mask room, it all seemed to sort of fit together. That it seems that we're all on the same page.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks.
Alan, did you have any comments about the town meeting?
No, just that I thought the plan was well thought out and well prepared, and I agree with you that within reason, I think this provides a safe environment, not risk-free, but with very limited risk, given weighing the balances of the democratic process that is important with people's health and safety.
Good, thank you. The other two things that I heard that came up on Friday were related to open town meetings, is that the state would allow us to postpone until August 1st if we wanted to. And the other is that if we wanted to operate with a reduced quorum, I think that we're now allowed by state law to have a 10% of whatever our prior quorum was.
Yeah. Right, but our quorum for annual town meeting is 0, so that doesn't matter for us. But yes, that is true. So
okay. Lee, you had one more question here?
Yes, thank you. John, how are you going to seat the boards up front? You may have mentioned this, but I don't remember it.
Yeah, I don't know if you have the PDF of the meeting capacity.
I don't. I'm not sure why, but I don't.
Okay, should I even attempt to share my screen here? That's a good question. Well, anyway, the idea is, imagine that you walk into the Fisher Gymnasium from where we normally walk in, and so there's a wall, the exterior wall facing into. The idea would be at that wall, between the town clerk and I, there would be room for a screen, and then the very first row, of essentially alternating front back of a section seats. There are essentially 9 seats there that are socially distanced, which should be enough for the 5 selectmen plus town manager, assistant town manager, and then whoever other department head may be most need to be speaking. Oh, thanks, Alan. You're going to pull it up and show it. And yeah, so if you look at where those S's are at the top right of the box, and if you look at, there's an S on the first row of bleachers pulled out. So that's 9 seats. If you look at the other side, the Fs, that's the 9 people on the finance committee. And my proposal is for the X's, the 4 X's next to the F at the bottom, plus one of the X's, plus maybe another seat would be for the school committee and for the superintendent of schools or what have you. And then the other thing is, I realize that there are many department heads who need to come to the town meeting in case they're needed. But if you look at the doorway that's right up at the top right of the box, that's a doorway that leads into the Leduc Gymnasium, which is the smaller gym. And the basic idea was to have some socially distanced seating or some tables where sort of the department heads who want to listen in and sort of be on call could sit there and then come in to the room as needed. Because I'd gotten a couple of questions from voters who wanted to try to maximize voter capacity of the gym and not have it dominated by department heads. And my thinking was, since not all department heads are needed at all times, we could just like we used to do with the small table with police, fire, DPW with that small table, just have them cycle in and out as the article warrants.
So you decided that you couldn't manage putting us in the auditorium up front and using the stage and everything, that it was more practical to put us all in the gymnasium?
I wanted to put most of the people in the largest room, and given that the limit on the auditorium was potentially quite small, I thought just in case there's sound or visual problems, having the boards and the town clerk and myself in the largest room made the most sense.
Thank you.
Good. So I don't think you need us to formally approve this, but if you'd like, I'd entertain a motion from the Board of Health to recommend going forward with this plan.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's mostly I want to make sure that the Finance Committee and all the town departments who have to, including the Selectmen who are going to discuss later tonight, they're going to start going through the motions of getting ready. And I just want to make it that we do that thinking that there's a high likelihood that it's going to happen, rather than have people feel that they've wasted a lot of work. So we all realize things can change at the very last minute. And I also want to start publicizing and trying to leverage any publicity that comes out of the election to let people know that we're doing what we can to provide as safe an environment as we can for our town meeting to proceed.
And thanks for that, John and Nathan. Yeah, I think getting that go ahead tonight, we're already behind the 8 ball. We're going to be rushing to get this done. Both Finance Committee, Board of Selectmen, the town staff. So it's going to be tight, but we'll do it. But getting that kind of go ahead tonight from the Board of Health is really imperative, because we need to start, a few weeks
No, and
ago.
I do want to, I did want to mention, I mean, everyone has the concern of what happens if the rooms fill up. And I just wanted to point out, that's really not that different if we were caught off guard and had only set up the auditorium and didn't have, audio and video in the gym. What would happen is if voters show up and we can't fit them, I would essentially entertain a motion to adjourn, and we would figure out when and where to adjourn to. Likewise, I want to make it clear for voters is that, once the meeting opens, the meeting is run by the voters. And if suddenly we have a majority of people who feel that the situation isn't safe enough, then someone could make a point of order and make a motion to adjourn. Now, we all want to get this done and we all want that to happen. But part of the rules of the game is once the meeting starts, it's the voters' meeting, and we just have to try to work with people to indicate we're trying to move as efficiently and as we can.
Nathan, I make a motion that the Board of Health endorse the proposal for holding town meeting on the on June 20th, subject to the plans presented by moderator John Arnold.
Do we have a second for that, Syed? Well, I will second that then. All those in favor? We'll do it by roll call. Alan?
Yes.
Dr. Hashmi? We've got an absent vote
He's
there.
still on mute. He's on mute.
Sorry, I have nothing more.
Was that a yes to endorse this, or a no?
Yes, sorry, yes.
And Dr. Walsh is a yes as well. Thank you.
We'll obviously talk about it next week just to make sure the numbers aren't raising any red flags. But
yep. All right.
Okay.
Well, what I'll do is I'll try to tidy up the presentations. Maybe we could, or maybe once we get them tidied up, we could still say they're draft, but maybe put them on the town's COVID-19 website and just let people know, so people can either talk to Board of Health or me or the Selectmen or whatever and answer any questions. And obviously, if Wendy, I, or anyone else comes up with any other ideas, we'll try to keep people apprised. But thank you very much. I appreciate your time and attention.
Yeah, Shelby Marshall.
Thank you. John, thank you very much, and to everyone that for their time to give us a visual. It's very helpful. I think it would be helpful for folks to understand how this is going to work. I don't know if this is too much to ask given the timing of everything, if it would be possible for someone with like a GoPro to kind of do you're going to walk through here, or like, even like a map or something, so that voters really understand what to expect, or attendees, so that they really understand what to expect when they get to town meeting, because I'm just worried that, with lines, there's going to be confusion. And then if there aren't people stationed sort of along the entry points at various points, sort of explaining the process, I think it's going to lead to maybe people leaving because they're concerned. It feels chaotic, even though there's a plan behind it. So I think we have to inform the voters in advance of what the plan is. And I personally think visually doing that is going to be the best way to do that.
Yeah, no, I'd be very willing to do a walkthrough if somebody could help me coordinate with Westborough TV to have somebody sort of follow me, almost like a man on the street type thing. I'm sure Wendy or I or both of us would be, very glad to sort of just start outside at the door and say, here's where we're going to go and here's what you're going to do, and just do a quick, 10 or 15 minute, this is what we're thinking, because I totally agree, that's a great idea, and if somebody could sort of help me do it, I'll gladly try to do that between now and the weekend.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of other business for the Board of Health that we need to discuss tonight with the Board of Selectmen, Alan or Syed, do you have anything that is on the agenda?
I don't have anything else.
This is Syed. I just have one quick thing. Steve, can you give us an update, or maybe Ray, if Ray is on the call? Where do we stand with the community pools?
So Ray, are you there?
Yeah, I'm right here.
I mean, we could both kind of tag team this. So as far as I was originally told, those were supposed to be in phase 2, section 2. They kind of like have a section A and section 2,
Okay.
section B. But, we're hearing that some towns are opening them today. So we were very confused today. We tried to reach out to the state as far as getting clarification on that. Places that want to open, we still have to inspect, and we've made 1 or 2 appointments for that. But that's something that we're going to reach out tomorrow to kind of get a definite answer to, because there's all these different minutiae to some of these regulations.
Okay, so you guys are working on it then.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Of
thank
course.
you.
So
Thank you very much.
just to make you aware, 2 weeks ago I did send out a listing of everything I needed turned in, and only 3 pools have turned in all the information. So 2 weeks ago I told them I would start doing inspections before the state opened, just so they'd have their inspections done and then they could open on the day and I'd give them their permit. But only 2 or 3 have actually gotten me all the paperwork. So now it's on
Thank you,
them.
Ray.
I gave them the time to do it. They just haven't gotten back to me.
Okay, thanks, Ray. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
And so the last thing on my agenda item is to bring up today, but not to actually have any action today. Maybe we can handle it next week. And that's immunizations. The state has said that pediatric immunizations are down, I think, 35% from where they were last year. And they take a strong recommendation that kids should still be getting vaccinations. It's important. These diseases that we have vaccines for can and will spread if we don't maintain the high vaccination rate. And so I'm thinking that we might want to, I think in the past we've allowed schools and camps to have medical religious exemptions for vaccination. If our rates in Westborough for certain activities drop below a certain amount, I'd like us to consider, no longer allowing a religious exemption for immunization. And this would be things for like starting up school next year and that sort of thing. I'd like to give people enough time so they can get appointments in. So maybe we can think about that, what course of action we may be comfortable taking, and we can talk about it next week.
Nathan, this is Syed. If there's something that you want to forget it, thank you. Thank you.
Ellen Enberg is asking a question. Is it possible for us to run a vaccination clinic? Steve, we've run vaccination clinics before, or Alan, I don't know if either of you want to just touch base as to maybe the last one we've done, what we have planned.
Well, we have nothing planned right now. Town hall is closed. I guess it depends upon, I guess we could, but, generally we just started our program right before the whole COVID thing hit. I think we had two clinics, and then we shut down. So we could start something up again. I don't know. It's a capacity thing. We generally give I guess I could look into it. I guess that's what I would say right now.
I think one of the issues is really a needs assessment. It's great to say it's down 35%, but what does that translate into region by region, or what age groups are we talking about? We have a refrigerator, but we don't have an unlimited supply of vaccines on hand, so we would need to anticipate what type of what the demand would be and try and get those types of supplies. So I do think that's those are factors we'd have to address before we could proceed with the clinic.
Yep. I don't want any action tonight. I really want to bring it up so that, the other groups involved, the school departments, the, individual people who have kids can kind of start to hear about this and get some feedback as well. Lee, it looks like you have a question.
Yes, thank you. It's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that hospitals can now do non-essential sort of elective procedures. So I'd imagine a lot of families in Westborough have pediatricians and can manage something through their own primary care provider. We may have families like the children who are on the school assistance, for food and stuff, who might be more in need for having something that they don't have to pay out of pocket for. I don't know. So when you're looking into it, Steve, that's maybe another factor to think about that you could do through the school.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
they are
Steve.
the ones that have been given the vaccine. So I'll talk to the school nurse. There was always going to be a push to have some kind of clinics, August, September before the school year started anyways, even in a non-COVID year. So let me talk to the school nurses and see what they think is appropriate. Like I said, we don't have a whole lot on hand because we haven't been doing a lot. If we did a huge clinic, we'd have to really stock up, and it's a total different scenario than what we ever really thought we'd be doing. So it just takes a little bit of organization.
I mean, I think the preferred route is to have people go see their own pediatrician to get the immunizations. It's nice to have their own doctor involved in terms of deciding what immunizations they should have and when they should get them. I don't want to take over that role in any sense, but I do think that it is important that the kids do get vaccinated. And I am concerned that if people are afraid to go to the doctor and they just show up at school, it might present a larger risk that, than if we make them go see a doctor.
There is also the fact, Nathan, that because there were a lot of elective office visits that were either not done or people wouldn't go for, even through, there was some telemedicine taking place. But my point is that there's pent-up demand for doctor schedules or healthcare provider schedules. They may be going to see a nurse practitioner or PA, but whoever, we don't know how long it's going to take to work down that backlog. So you easily could have a situation where come August, people haven't been able to get in to see providers and need the immunization.
Yep. Good. So we'll have to work on all those details. So thank you. I don't think that the Board of Health has anything else unless the selectmen have any other questions that you guys would like to ask of us.
Just in case people are watching about town meeting, was one thing I just wanted to mention, and it might come up later in the selectmen's meeting, and they can tell me if they want me to stay on or not. I just wanted to be clear that one of the things we're going to be trying to do to improve efficiency of the town meeting is, since there are a number of articles that are sufficient unknowns, that there's going to be a proposal to pass over a number of articles. And we're going to try to do that at the beginning of the meeting all in one fell swoop. So once we really get into the meat of the budget and whatever, we can just go. So I want people to know that in addition to all the safety measures to make it safe once we're there, we're also taking measures to try to make the meeting not lose its deliberative nature, but also to make it run effectively and as efficiently as we can. So we're working on that avenue as well.
John, I thought we were also looking to see if we could have presentations online. Is that still on?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Anything's possible. We can talk about that. Yeah.
Given the short time frame between now and town meeting, I think we had thought that we would do that when we thought that we would be preparing for the March 28th meeting, and that's when that suggestion initially came up. And it's certainly something that we would like to do in the future, but this is a very tight turnaround. The school committee has not voted on their budget number yet. The finance committee has to have their recommendations to the printer, I think, by Friday. There's a lot to do. So I'm not sure that we're going to be able to get them online prior to the town meeting.
Yeah, I think we'll all do what we can, but there's not a lot of time to do stuff. So we'll do what we can.
Well, thank you guys for all the hard work. So Ian, let's see, I guess I'll entertain a motion then for us to close the Board of Health portion of this meeting.
I move we adjourn the Board of Health meeting for tonight.
I second that.
So we'll do it by roll call. Dr. Ehrlich?
Yes.
Dr. Hashmi?
Yes.
Dr. Walsh? Yes. So thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you as always. This is great. I know the community really, really appreciates it. We get a lot of very positive comments. So appreciate your time as always. Extremely helpful.
Well, the Selectmen have also been doing fantastic work too. So thank you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Great. So I'm going to move us right into the agenda for the Board of Selectmen's meeting and hopefully get us back on track, although we're not too far off from our stated times. The first thing that we have is approval of minutes for our May 26th, 2020 meeting. I'd entertain a motion for their approval.
I would move we approve them as presented in our packet.
Second, Marshall.
Seconded by Selectman Marshall. Any comments, corrections, or questions?
Selectman member, yes, I have one just general comment on the last page where it says department head updates were read into the record. Could that also reflect that that they were read into the record and will be posted on the town website? Just so that anyone reading the minutes would know that the town manager's report is available to read, even though the details aren't listed here in the minutes.
The report, all of the documents that are part of the meeting are part of the packet that gets part of it. So
No, I'm just saying that if someone were looking at the minutes, to let them know that the town manager's report is available on the website, because you're posting those as well.
Which is part of the department head, right?
Right.
Update, yeah, because people really, I think we've got a lot of positive feedback that people really enjoy reading the town manager's update, which includes those.
Lee, you okay with that? Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? If not, all those in favor, be a roll call vote. Selectman Edinburgh.
Yes.
Selectman Emery.
Yes.
Selectman Marshall.
Yes.
Selectman Hashmi.
Yes.
And Selectman Johnson, yes. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is for discussion and vote applications for alteration of premises for outdoor dining. We did have one earlier today and we had one late, so I'm not sure if everybody saw that, but we have two in front of us. One is for Tenka. The second one is for Harry's. I will turn it over to the town manager and Fred Leonardo for any comments on that.
So I'll let Fred speak to this, but this is for outdoor dining. The Board of Selectmen established last week a procedure for application of creating or expanding outdoor dining at restaurants so that restaurants could open in phase 2. And so we set up a process with the building commissioner, both chiefs and the Board of Health to be approvers on this type of application. And the only time that the application would come to the Board of Selectmen is if they were requesting to serve alcohol. Typically an alteration of premises would also have to be approved by the ABCC, but with the governor's order, that's not required at this time. So we have this standing agenda item so that we can approve applications as they come forward. So I can put the proposed layout for Tenka up first, if you want to take up Tenka first, and then Fred, if you want to speak to Tenka's application.
Sure, thank you, everybody. So Tenka, well, I don't know if you see it or not, but Tenka is basically proposing to put, I believe it's 5 tables or so, right outside their windows, if you will. Yeah, you can see them in that diagram. So it's their sidewalk, but there's nothing really on the sidewalk. They won't block the main entrance into their store, and the other store, actually to the left of this diagram, is not. It's vacant right now, so there's nobody in there. So nobody would actually traverse over that sidewalk at all. It's right in front of their store, so they'll block it off with a fence eventually and all that stuff. So every department has approved this application.
Lee, you're on mute, I think. It looked like you were trying to talk.
Oh, looks good to me.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the application for alteration of premises for the alcohol purposes?
Yes, Mr. Chairperson, Lee Emery moves that we approve the Tenka outdoor seating plan and the extension so that they can serve alcohol.
Would you like the official wording?
No, I think we know what the official wording is, but I think that kind of covered it.
It's pursuant to the governor's order because that has an expiration date.
Yeah, so maybe we just
Oh,
adjust
that's
to that.
right,
Lee.
Yes, I didn't have that in front of me. I'm sorry.
So I guess I just would amend the motion to
You got
say
it,
pursuant to Governor's Order COVID-19, Order number 35, dated June 2nd, 2020.
Perfect.
And it's at Tanker at 153 Turnpike Road, just so we have that. Is there a second on that?
Second, Marshall.
Okay, any comments or questions? Okay, roll call vote. Selectman Edinburgh.
Yes.
Selectman Emery.
Yes.
Selectman Marshall.
Yes.
Selectman Hashmi.
Yes.
And Selectman Johnson, yes, 5-0. Okay, next one is Harry's Restaurant. Again, this one came in late, so I'm not sure that all board members saw this, but Chris, I don't know if you have that in front to display, and then Fred, likewise, if you want to talk about this one as well.
Sorry, Fred, go ahead. I'm just trying to rotate it.
Yes, that's fine. So Harry's did come in late. And I'm remiss if I don't say this, and I apologize. Destiny Ashworth, and I know a lot of people have had hands in all this, but she's been tremendous during all this. She's put together all the paperwork for it. She continues to work with all the applicants. She puts them in. So she's done a fantastic job on that. I want to make sure I mention that. So what's happening with Harry's, he's been kind of in a disarray, but basically he wants to put his seating on the right side of his business as you're in the parking lot area. So as you're looking at the front of Harry's, if you're familiar with it, he wants to position his tables to the right of the building, if you will. And that would take up the parking spots that way. Every department has signed off on this as well.
Great. So I look for a motion to begin discussion on this one.
Sure. Use that same language that we had. I move pursuant to the Governor's Order COVID-19, Order 35, dated June 2nd, 2020, to approve the change in description of the licensed premises at 149 Turnpike Road as presented for the purpose of permitting outdoor alcohol services.
And second.
Second by Selectman Edinburgh. Comments, questions from
what?
The board?
One question, and just because it's not clear from the diagram, what's the method of protecting diners from car traffic in the parking lot?
His intent is to have a fence up on that to separate the parking area from the table area by a fence. Myself and the fire department are committed to do joint inspections on those, so we go out and make sure that verify, in fact, they have some kind of separations and stuff.
Yes.
I would say last week, Fred, I did see you at Central House, which is one we approved last Thursday at bright and early in the morning, working with them. So thank you for doing that and doing what you said you do, not that we didn't trust that you would. So thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. And we're scheduled, actually, Jason Persky and myself are scheduled for tomorrow morning to go out, should you have approved these as well.
Perfect.
Is it possible? I mean, my concern with the fencing, not knowing what type it would be, given the high rate of speed that folks travel on Route 9 and potentially the speed in which they enter the parking lot and whether they're used to it or not. And I guess I'm wondering, should they provide some signage earlier in the parking lot that says, kind of slow down, number one, like one of those little guys, with a flag or something. I don't know and, I guess, a Jersey barrier is a whole lot more difficult to go through and it's a whole lot more protective of folks sitting there, albeit it's probably a greater expense to have it brought in. But even if it were cornered on that I don't have a compass here, but on that first corner to protect folks, I don't know. I just worry about cars coming in there. So Fred, I trust that you and public safety will address that, but that would be my only concern. I think the layout is great. I don't know where else they would put it, but that would be my concern.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that. It's a little deceptive, and again, we help him kind of put this together. But his parking lot actually has quite a bit of area there.
Yeah.
So you're a little ways into the parking lot before you get to the store. So yeah, somebody could come barreling off of Route 9 certainly, but I don't know if we have great argument about that. But certainly, I'll talk to Deputy Chief Fursky and myself when we go out there and view this one. I don't know that he'll actually be ready for tomorrow. He's having trouble locating tables. So we'll make sure that we feel comfortable with it before we approve it.
Or just, maybe even like a slow down sign. I don't know, but yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, we can certainly suggest that he does some signage out there.
Okay, thanks. Anything further from the board? Okay, if not, roll call vote. Selectman Marshall?
Marshall, yes.
Selectman Emery?
Emery, yes.
Selectman Edinburgh?
Edinburgh, yes.
Selectman Hashmi?
Yes.
Selectman Johnson, yes. Great. Just for the public to know too, so that's the only ones we had tonight. We are posted for Thursday evening as well, which is what the board will be doing to hopefully act on these expeditiously if they come through. So,
yeah, just as a word on that. So we do have an application for Tavolino's, but it came in at literally like 5:30. So we thought it would be kind of not good to try to get in front of you tonight, to be honest with you. It came in so late.
okay.
So that'll be hopefully scheduled for Thursday.
Yeah, so we're booked for Thursday. We will, if they're ready, we'll act on it then. If you're ready to bring it to us, we'll act on it then.
Thank you.
Shelby, now that Chief Laurie's back, do you want to ask him anything about the parking and the safety?
No, I'll leave that in the good hands of our building commissioner and public safety team to work through the process. Yep.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks, Fred, again, and thanks. Pass along our thanks to Destiny too. Thanks for bringing that up, but pass along our thanks.
I will. Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is update on the animal bylaw enforcement. And so the chief is here. Chris, I don't know if you have anything up front on this.
Yeah, I just I know that some have been reaching out with concerns about the animal control bylaw enforcement, specifically on the trails, because people are out using the trails more. And so Sergeant Daniels and Chief Laurie, and I believe Melinda, who is our animal control officer, are on the call to answer questions. But in addition to the ACO doing patrols, we do have police patrols on the trails. And one thing I really want to stress, because I know that the selectmen have been reached out to individually, is that if someone has a complaint about law breaking, they should be contacting dispatch. They should not be sending their complaint to selectmen via email. Like any other law breaking, that needs to be filed appropriately with the police department. But I will let Chief Laurie and Sergeant Daniels speak to that.
So, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Busy times for the police department, and obviously certain people aren't happy right now. So I'll let Sergeant Daniels kind of take lead on this. He assists Melinda. He reports to him directly before it gets to myself, the lieutenant, or the deputy chief. In most cases, they were able to take corrective action. Sergeant Daniels is also in charge of our community policing unit. So yeah, we have been actively patrolling. I can tell you one of the calls that I took while you were having your Board of Health meeting was a fellow department I called because there was a bonfire at Lake Chauncey with some kids. So we went down and we take care of that. We're patrolling these areas. We're patrolling our parking lots. We're patrolling our trails, both shifts on duty. And then we notched it up a bit. Community policing is very near and dear to us. So we dusted off, cleaned off the bikes, and I'll let Sergeant Daniels take it from here.
Thank you, Chief. Lee, thank you for thanking me for being here. But I just wanted to go over some of the things that the Chief discussed. But I got together with the animal control official, Melinda McKendrick, at the beginning of May. at the chief's direction, we scheduled some bike patrol units because we were receiving a number of complaints. What I did was, after speaking with Melinda, we determined that, usually during the week between 4 and 8 p.m. is where we have a lot of people with their animals walking through the trails, typically unleashed. So we ended up scheduling about 9 patrol shifts and put in about 36 hours of bike time on these trails. We utilize the bikes, obviously, because it's easier. We have the e-bikes. It's easier to get down to the trails and cover ground very quickly. We did that. We put in that 36 hours, and we had the officers reported about 11 instances that occurred where they observed individuals with animals off leash. At this point, I felt that it was probably best to do, some sort of education. So what we had was every time the officer interacted with someone, they advised them of the leash law. And that was it. There were no fines or anything that went along with it. But most of the instances that we had where we saw the most violations, I think, were at Lake Chauncey. We had 5 violations on one occasion. Another occasion, we were at Veterans Park. We had 4 violations there. And then also on Andrew Street at the end of the road, there's a long trail that people use for travel with their pets. We had 1 there and 1 at Minuteman Park. So we chose to take an educational approach to this, obviously, because, we feel that presence usually deters these things. So, that's how we started. And, Melinda McKendrick is outstanding. So the chief says I supervise her, and obviously I play more of a support role for her. She is out at all hours of the night. I work 4 to 12 and midnight to 8. So I hear her on the radio all the time, and she's truly dedicated to this job. So we're very lucky to have her.
And I'd like to also say, she is doing an outstanding job. And honestly, with some of these emails that we've all received, I take great umbrage with them because she does such a fantastic job. I mean, she's out on the weekends. I mean, she's just there. So I give Melinda kudos. I know Christy shared with you her report to us on the outstanding work she's doing. She's on those trails every day. So again, if you have any specific questions for her, but I can attest, I can tell you, our animal control and our officers are doing the best we can during very trying times. Just now, Melinda can attest to this. I've received probably 3 or 4 voice messages for our animal control official, 3 or 4. She's in the Reserve Academy now, so it's going to give her more enforcement opportunities and leeway. And that, because of COVID-19, her academy class was postponed. And they're going to be going back soon if they haven't gone back already. I think they may have already gone back. But at the end of the day, I just want to reassure everyone that just like all the traffic complaints we get, if you notice, we really try to educate people. Unless it's really egregious, we're trying to really support people, especially in these very trying times right now. We're all, dealing with things in our lives. And I can tell you our police officers in extremely trying times right now are doing an exceptional job. I addressed 4 to 12 roll call today. We initiated roll call again, social distancing. We had stopped that for a while. All our employees masked up. So I just want you to know how proud I am of our entire staff. I include my 2 administrative assistants, and I also include Melinda as part of this police department. She's part of our team. And I want to publicly acknowledge and thank her for her service, as well as my officers. And if you have any specific questions for her, by all means, she is on the call.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Shelby, looks like you had a question.
Yep. I have a couple questions and a comment. So first of all, thank you, Chief and Sergeant, for the work that you did to bring this before us. I know I was one of those that asked for the information and the update. Less about my concern about the situation, but more to help the public understand the work that is being done to protect not only those who are with dogs, but those who may not be as comfortable around them. So thank you. One observation that I did have in the information that you provided is it seems, and it might just be a practical thing, but perhaps you can explain it that, and I know Melinda's on the phone, so maybe she can explain it. It seems like sometimes there's work that's being done that's not being sort of logged or aggregated in some ways through the system. And I know later we're going to talk about our staffing report and how important data is for many reasons. So is there a reason why maybe some of the work that she's doing, if I understood it correctly, doesn't get logged? Or does it eventually get logged, but it just doesn't get logged at the time of her work?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're doing our best, and Melinda has brought that to my attention. We're doing our best to make sure we log everything that we do. And quite frankly, it's been busy, and I don't know if it's just, mistakes. We inadvertently, something doesn't get added. She's in Grafton a lot too. She's just not here in Westborough. But I'm going to do my best, I promise, to make sure we properly collect all the data, because I think it's important to show. Especially, Grafton, we want to make sure they're paying their fair share towards this program. My commitment to you and Sergeant Daniel's commitment, is to make sure, that we do document everything appropriately. And if I missed something, Melinda, please jump in.
There are occasionally things that come to me that go into my logs. As you know, I keep a list of my active things like quarantines that I may not call in. Sometimes those will take 2 or 3 visits, and I may just call in one at the beginning and then one at the end. Not every single time. There's also, I get phone calls that come direct to me at the desk, and I'll just write them up. I'll make a notation in my log system, but it may not appear on the police department log system. A lot of that I add up in my quarterly warrant returns and monthly reports. So they're getting logged in that sense, but they're not necessarily entered into the police department system.
Okay, I appreciate that. And again, not here to tell you how to do your job, but I just think data allows all of us to look at, staffing objectively and really understand the scope of the work that's being done. So I know you guys know that because you're professionals, but I would just encourage, that good work to continue. And I guess I just want to make a comment that I appreciate the educational approach that you're taking. I think, we're in trying times. We're in trying times with COVID-19, and now we're in more trying times. So I think the educational approach is always, creates a better overall community relationship. I hope the public respects that and also recognizes that, kind of not to abuse it. So, I think we get more with, what is that saying, sugar than we do with stick or something. At least that's what my parents taught me. But I appreciate the good work that you're doing, and I do think we need to keep it up because of the use of the trails. So thank you.
Thanks.
Just to reiterate, Shelby, Shelby's absolutely correct. Just like anything else, if we're facing, a frequent flyer, so to speak, that is consistently breaking the law, speeding, leash law violations, that individual, of course, we tried to educate them. It didn't work, so that's when, a fine will take place. So right now it's good for you to hear that, people, once we talk to them, educate them, they're in compliance for the most part.
Great. Thank you, Chief. So Lee, I see you, but Selectman Hashmi asked first. I'm going to have him go first, then to Selectman Emery. So Syed?
So first, I actually wanted to thank our police department. I've seen Melinda out and about. I've seen various other officers patrolling the trails, and this is all great. But I would just remind the residents that, leashing your dog is an act of courtesy. It's an act of kindness, and human relations are about respect, courtesy, decency, and kindness. And, just leashing your dog when you see someone is the same as opening the door for someone, and letting them pass first. It's just a sign of respect. And the chief keeps talking about this, but, we are in trying times. He's absolutely correct. But the only way, I keep saying this because it's one of my favorite sayings, the only way you fight a plague is with decency. And while the town and the police are working hard to enforce the law, ultimately it's incumbent on us to to show each other common courtesy, to show each other some decency, and that is what I'm hoping our town, as we move forward. I mean, I think our police are doing a great job, but at the end of the day, this is about us and how we treat each other and how we respect each other. And so I hope that I hope we consider that that this crisis calls for the best of us, and this is just a small act, but it carries so much power. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Selectman Emery.
I'm not as patient as Selectman Hashmi is. I think if we have repeat offenders in this particular area of enforcement, that we need to treat them just as you would repeat offenders in some other aspect. The trails are for everybody to enjoy, and the leash law doesn't mean put your dog on a leash when you see somebody coming. It's have your dog on the leash at all the time, unless you have them under control. And it can be very frightening. I know I'm a frail person now. I never used to be. But if I got knocked over, I could break a bone very easily. My skin is very fragile. I could get torn. I mean, this is a frightening thing for some people. And if people can't, do it because they feel the necessity to be kind, as Dr. Hashmi is saying, then we just have to tell them you're going to get fined.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Yes.
Selectman Edinburgh?
So I just want to commend the team. Early this morning, I believe, or was it yesterday? I've lost track of my days. I received a text from a citizen who's concerned about a very small number of dog owners using the tennis courts at Armstrong School as a dog run, and some of them leaving the mess behind after letting their dogs roam free. I did ask that person to contact Melinda, our animal control officer, with that directly, but also pass the word on through the town manager's office. And it was very heartening to see that Westborough Recreation, a couple hours later, had pictures on their Facebook page of the sign that they had just put up, reminding people that dogs aren't allowed on the courts and what the rules are. And so I think that is just a great example of the responsiveness to the community, and I appreciate that very much.
Great, thank you. Anything else from the board? Thank you for sharing the information, Sergeant Daniels, Chief Laurie.
No problem.
Linda, keep up the good work. We appreciate it.
We
Thank you
appreciate
very
it
much.
Melinda.
And on behalf of the department, it's our honor to serve. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Okay, next on the agenda is discussion vote on board and committee reappointments. These are the annual reappointments. This was in our package. These are not all of them. These are still ones that will be coming in. We did receive a couple of emails later today that they'll be pushed to our next agenda for approval, just so folks that are watching, if they don't hear their names, it may not be that we got it into the packet in time, but these all expire at the end of June, so we will get them done in time. So, Christy, anything you want to add before we go in? I think there may be a couple of changes here, but
yeah. So the town manager appointments. Obviously, those are appointed by me, and so I'll be appointing these people, and then the board has that veto authority. I think it's 2 weeks after my appointment. The town manager selectman appointments, that's my appointment with the board's concurrence. So I'd ask you to vote your concurrence of those appointments tonight. And then obviously the third list, which is the selectman appointed, is just your appointment. I think we got an email about one of the appointments. So I just want to check on that. And I think that there were some conversation. Let me just check. Steela's been working on getting the reappointments, and she had sent an email. Oh, that Dexter Blois would like to not be reappointed at this time to the Municipal Building Committee or the Country Club Operating Committee. So he's on your list, but he should be removed.
Yeah, one of them is on your list for the Municipal Building Committee, which is your appointment.
Yep.
With our ability to veto, but we'll remove him. So right now it would just be Peter O'Neill. And then on our appointments, which would be Country Club Operating Committee, removing Dexter Blois from that one at his request.
And then we were asked to add Joshua Lee Smith to be reappointed to the Economic Development Committee. So you have a list there of several committee members, and Joshua Lee Smith would also like to be appointed. So we just received his confirmation that he wants to remain on the committee.
Yeah, and I think on discussions on our side, or with Selectman Edinburgh, right now is on Capital Expenditure Planning Committee, with other things looking to move off. And I volunteered to be the Selectman's representative to the Capital Expenditure Planning Committee, if folks are fine with that. So that piece, and I apologize if you hear my dog barking in the background.
He doesn't like the idea.
She's on a leash.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Ian, that although my name is not on the appointment right now for economic development, it would have been, but I will not be putting my name there, and would like to recommend that Alan Edinburgh be added to that as the Selectman's representative to that committee.
Which I am happy and willing to do.
Chairman,
Yes.
I just have a comment on Christie's appointments. I certainly recognize that as town manager, she has the authority to, recommend whoever she feels is appropriate, and that we have the veto power at some point if we want to exercise that. So I appreciate that. And I certainly support her recommendations, but I would like to add a caveat that we consider whether or not to maintain the Municipal Building Committee as constituted following the completion and closeout of the Forbes building, unless there is another assignment or until there is another assignment. And at that point, have the town manager reconstitute a committee based on the specific expertise needed for that, whatever new project there is. Obviously, this issue would have to be on the Board of Selectmen's agenda to discuss for any consideration I am offering, and would have to be considered in the context of the town charter, prior town meeting deliberations, and the need for the town manager to have teams in place that she needs to fulfill her obligations. So I'm not asking for any action right now. I just think that this is a committee that needs to be populated with people with expertise specific to whatever the project is that's coming up. The library is going to come up probably soon. That's nothing like the police and safety buildings, and I just think that we may want to think about this. And it's a complicated issue. So I just wanted to put it on the radar, but I totally support our town manager and what she is trying to do.
Great. I think we've gone through. I'd look for a motion on this one.
Ian, do you want to do these in groups, like the town manager appointments?
Well, town manager's appointments are done. So I think with those appointments, we have our 14 days. We don't have to.
Okay, sorry.
What I would say is, I could take it as one motion or separate if you want, but would be the concurrence on the town manager selectmen appointed, which are in front of us, which are the animal control officer, animal inspector, and the 2 commissioner of trust funds individuals.
I'll make that first motion for the town manager selectmen appointed grouping with concurrence for the animal control officer, inspector, and commissioner of trust funds.
Ms. Emery, second.
Okay, any comments or questions on those appointments?
This would apply to the next round of the next motion, but I want to just, it takes a village to run a town. I just want to thank, folks that raise their hand to be volunteers and be vested, and hope that for anyone watching and saying, wow, how do I get on that list? You reach out to our town manager or assistant town manager and tell folks what you're interested in, what your passion is, and we'll find a spot for you, because we need more people to be involved and, sharing their ideas and their voice.
Particularly if you're interested in being on the Cable TV Advisory Committee, because we're looking for people willing to serve on that committee.
critically important as we talk about this continued discussion of how do we reach more people in our town in the absence of, mainstream newspapers, kind of going by the wayside other than our very local paper, and Westborough Public TV, public access is sort of free, unbiased news and sharing of information. So it's an important group.
And I would add, with respect to Westborough TV, is we think about even what's going on with the current COVID-19 crisis and the order of magnitude increase in the number of meetings that they've been able to provide live stream to the public. We're actually seeing greater community engagement and interest in what's happening across a broader spectrum of boards and committees than we ever have. And they're instrumental in that part of our ability to represent and provide quality information to our residents. So thank you for that. And that committee is definitely important.
Great. So anything further on the town manager selectmen appointed ones with the motion? Not a roll call vote. Selectman Emery?
Yes.
Selectman Marshall?
Yes.
Selectman Hashmi?
Yes.
Selectman Edinburgh?
Yes.
And Selectman Johnson, yes. So 5-0, 5 being present. How about a motion for the Board of Selectmen appointed with the modifications that we had?
I move that we move forward and make the appointments under our responsibility as noted, with the changes and exceptions as discussed this evening.
I second that motion, Emery.
Seconded by Emery. Just one comment on my part. When just for the record, I will not be voting because of potential conflict of interest on cultural council, because my wife is one of the appointees. So I'll just abstain from that piece to it, just for the record.
Oh, fair point.
Actually, speaking of which, I should probably abstain for the CMRPC because I'm the guy that's on it. So I'll vote for everyone else except that.
No, you can vote for yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, you can? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'd like you to vote for yourself so that we can support that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm really looking. Oh, I love doing this in COVID-19 times. Okay.
Yeah, no doubt.
Okay. All those in favor, roll call vote. Selectman Emery?
Emery, yes.
Selectman Marshall?
Marshall, yes.
Selectman Hashmi?
Yes.
Selectman Edinburgh?
Edinburgh, yes.
And Johnson, yes. 5-0, 5 being present. Okay. Next item on the agenda moving forward is discussion vote to authorize the town manager to sign any application for, I'm sorry, I jumped over one. Discussion vote for approval and authorization to sign the aggregation adder. And I apologize. And this was sent to us, information was sent separately earlier today to folks.
Yesterday. Yeah, so people would have received it yesterday. I'm actually going to let Kim's actually working really closely with Sustainable Westborough and Selectman Marshall, and also our consultant for the aggregation program. So I'm going to let Kim speak to this.
Okay, great. There's a whole lot of ifs that go with this. This really provides a framework for the town to move forward with this operational adder at some point in the future, if the town wishes to do so. The adder is an additional amount on the kilowatt hour charge. It's 1/10 of a cent. Right now, the town doesn't have the ability to implement this because our approved aggregation plan, as approved by the state's Department of Public Utilities, does not allow for this. If at some point in the future we amended the plan, it were approved, and we wish to go forward, this provision added to the contract allows the town to collect this adder, so 1/10 of a cent per kilowatt hour. It is collected of all. It's not, the user doesn't have the option. It is applied to all of the program participants. And those funds come back to the town and are used for energy efficiency projects that would benefit program participants. Couple things, I had a conversation with our consultant on Friday to understand it is, even if approved by the Department of Public Utilities, it is wholly the town's choice when and for how long to implement this. In some communities, they'll do it for a period of time. They have a specific project in mind. Once they've collected enough funds to pay for that project, they may cease collecting the adder, perhaps resuming it later when another project comes to light.
I have one point, potentially a point of clarification, Kim. I believe the contract language does not stipulate the 1 cent per, a tenth of a cent per kilowatt hour. That's the example we've been using in our discussions, and it could potentially be more or less as we design the program in the future.
Right. Typically, that's what the Department of Public Utilities will approve. Thank you, Pete. That's typically what's the Department of Public Utilities will approve, and the community can implement up to that. They're not required to go to the full amount. It's anything up to and including that. Thanks, Pete.
Kim, do you have any idea what that would cost an average consumer a year?
I do not.
Okay.
I don't. Pete, is that anything that's been looked at?
You're gonna make me do the math in my head on the fly.
It's
I think
a couple of dollars is the number that our consultant was using.
A couple of dollars. A couple of
annually.
Does that mesh with? And again, this is the conversation with our consultant. So she may be looking at a broader group of communities on average. You know, it could be a little more, a little less here.
Sounds negligible.
Yeah, I just did a rough calculation for my house, and it would be about $8 a year.
You're wicked smart.
He's a heavy user. I only want to pay $2.
I think based on my understanding of the average for Westborough, would be averaging about 7
per year.
Per year.
Okay.
And again, that's if you went to the a tenth of a cent per kilowatt hour. There's also another kind of nuanced point maybe, and that's that we have 3 plans in our new contract. And the adder could be put in only the 100% greener plan, or could be put in the default plan. So as we design the plan in the future, we could pick which plan. I would think it would be unlikely we'd ever put it in the lowest cost plan, because that's designed for lowest cost. So it would be more likely in the other 2, or maybe just in the greener option. Is that correct, Kim? We can pick which plans it goes in?
Yes.
So just a question on my side. So just quickly, we vote this tonight. You go through the things. You just quickly go through then the steps, and when does it all then come back through the board again? Is there any town meeting vote? I'm assuming not. It's just it's a board action, but there's multiple steps, it sounds like.
The potential where it would come back before the board, the next potential ask might be to move forward with an amendment of the town's to seek an amendment to the town's aggregation plan. That would be something our consultant would handle on our behalf. It would go through DPU. She cautioned me that is a very lengthy process. So it's possible, the way she framed it, it's possible if we wish to pursue that, it could be approved during the course of the 3-year contract that was just executed and begins in November. So I think just numerous times she made the point, this is not likely to happen quickly if we do go down that road.
Great, thank you. So any other comments, or is there a motion someone wants to make on the?
I'm happy to make the motion. I move to authorize the town manager to approve and execute an amendment to the competitive electric service agreement dated April 29th, 2020 between Dynergy Energy Services East LLC and the town of Westborough, allowing the town to include an operational adder in the rates, subject to Department of Public Utilities approval.
Oh, well done. I second that. Emery second.
Great. Any further comments or questions? Okay, with none, roll call vote. Selectman Emery.
Emery, yes.
Selectman Marshall.
Marshall, yes.
Selectman Hashmi.
Yes.
Selectman Edinburgh.
Edinburgh, yes.
And Selectman Johnson. Johnson, yes. 5-0, 5 being present. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Novak, for your help with that. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Kim and Pete for all of, and John Metzger for all the input and work on this. It's been a great team effort.
And thank you, Pete Dumbeck.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I believe we'll be back next meeting to discuss the communication plan with you.
Great. Thanks. We look
Very
forward
good.
to it.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Kim, thank you for your coordination there. Appreciate it. Next on the agenda is discussion vote to authorize the town manager to sign any application for grants related to or for COVID-19. Christy, I'm going to turn this back to you, if you don't mind.
Yep. So all town departments, specifically, public safety, board of health, finance director, and school department, but everyone has been tracking our COVID-19 expenses since this all started. We have a specific code, so anything that we purchased for COVID-19, so this includes sanitizing ambulances and purchase of PPE and all sorts of things related to COVID. We've been tracking in our finance system. And so the purpose of that is obviously to be able to apply for grants. And so as the board's aware, there's FEMA grants available as well as CARES Act grants. And so we just recently applied for our first round of COVID-19 expenses. Excuse me. And the person that is the signatory on these grants is the chief executive or their designee. And so we did have Selectman Johnson sign for the most recent grant application, but this would just be a vote to authorize me to do it on your behalf as we move forward. So certainly keeping an eye on all grant opportunities and working through all the applications.
So I can make a motion.
Perfect.
I move to authorize the town manager to pursue all grant opportunities available to the town of Westborough as a result of COVID-19 and sign all applications related thereto.
I second.
Okay, second by Selectman Edinburgh. Any comments or questions?
Christy, I think you're probably going to say of course, but as you sign those grants or pursue them and sign them, and you'll be updating the board to let us know, I presume, kind of the work that's being done.
Yep. I mean, I can let you know, specifically what our COVID expenses are. Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, again, totally fine with you and your team pursuing all that. I just think, I think it's important that the selectmen as well as the, public have visibility to the, the work that is being done. So if in your town manager update, you can include that, or if it needs to be a specific line item, obviously your prerogative, that would be great.
Now, Shelby, is that just total dollar amount applied for, or is it the detail behind all of the?
No. Yeah, sorry. Let me clarify. No, I mean, I think it's a paragraph kind of discussion of here's the grant, here's what it encompasses, we're pursuing it. And then if we get it, we got it, great. And then obviously as on whatever cycle makes sense, if it's quarterly, Christy, to be able to understand what our COVID expenses have been or whatever that cycle is. I just think that as those numbers roll up, that would be great. I don't need to know how many Band-Aids or gloves we've handed out and we've purchased and all that, just big picture. But I know that, I'm always amazed at how many grants we do apply for, and are successful in getting. And I think that work now more than ever, as we look at, the impact to our residents, of tax dollars and all that. It's important that we have visibility to that work.
Yes, and to publicly acknowledge those who participated in the successful application.
Great.
Yep, I can do that.
Any further questions or comments? Not roll call vote. Selectman Edinburgh?
Yes.
Selectman Emery?
Yes.
Selectman Marshall?
Yes.
Selectman Hashmi?
Yes.
And Selectman Johnson, yes. So 5-0. Okay, next on the agenda is a discussion on the staffing study. This was a request that the board had requested at our last meeting to put this on the agenda for the purpose of the board to discuss any comments that we had for the staffing study prior to the final draft being submitted. We're also in the process, and it's still open for public comment. So another pitch, as of right now, it's supposed to close tomorrow on that, but that is still open for residents to review and post comments they may have. With that, Chris, I do want to, you had written some commentary as a summary in our packets. I'd like to give you the opportunity just to speak to that and then kind of really open it up to the group. And I really think that, not to steal Christy's thunder, but I think as a discussion we had at the last meeting too, this is not the chance for us to come in and talk about, kind of prioritization or the implementation plan. That will come, and that will be work that we'll do as a town. But this is really about any things potentially that we're missing. One of the things I think we had brought up last time, just as an example, is some disappointment around regionalization. So those are the kind of things I think we want to discuss tonight to make sure that we get the report covering everything and no omissions there. But sorry, Christy, I'll turn it back to you, or turn it over to you.
Yeah, so I just, the comments that I made are sort of about process. So the town obviously spent over $100,000 on this study with the purpose of looking at our staffing using a holistic approach. In the past, we certainly have sort of just heard from different departments based on what they thought their needs were. This was really an effort to look at the whole organization and provide opportunities for or recommendations for potential efficiency, and also recommending staff as needed where we had our greatest needs. So I think that it's important that it's absolutely important that we have a very clear process related to implementation of any recommendations. But given that we haven't received the final report yet, I think that what we asked department heads to look at when they initially looked at the report, and what the message has been to other boards and committees, is that if there's things sort of like regionalization that we think are missing that need to be included in the final report, this is the opportunity for that discussion. And what I would hope to do is, once we receive a final report, that I could bring forward to the board all of the recommendations that are for the board or town meeting action, and then you could have a retreat where we talk about prioritization of the implementation of those recommendations. I just also want to be clear, because we did recently receive a set of comments that the staffing study was not a study to list all of the responsibilities of all of the employees and all the departments in the community. The staffing study was to identify areas of potential improvement in terms of process. And so I think that there has been some confusion about where departments, where certain positions or departments, not everything that they do is listed, that there might be a lack of work being done. And that is not the case. That was not part of the report to list all of the job functions and all the responsibilities of every department.
Great, thank you. So with that, I guess I will open it up to the board for discussion. So,
Ian? Go ahead.
Would you like to go through us in some order, Ian?
sure, I will go with Selectman Edinburgh first. So I heard his voice first.
Okay. That's fine. So I've put some stuff in writing and through Kim provided it so it can be forwarded back to the team at Novak. I'll keep this very high level. I think, looking at the community survey, there isn't much description of how the survey was conducted or given the timing of the survey period being really the onset and the ramp up of the COVID-19 crisis. The results we got from the community survey were fairly limited in number and extremely limited with respect to demographic diversity and broad representation of our town. So as far as content for the report, a couple of sentences reflecting that and the level to which, it's a good data set, but it's a small piece of a bigger data set that we over time, I think, should gather. And so some commentary in the report about that fact and the level at which the community survey data was used to influence any of the recommendations and to what extent. And just, to make sure that we understand that there aren't recommendations being made that are, too heavily reliant on an unfortunately very limited, one of many data sets, but a limited one at that. So that's community surveys. Let me switch screens here. And I looked at the under the town-wide analysis and recommendations. Recommendation 1 about boards and commissions. I feel that this section definitely needs some rework. The list of the information provided about our boards and committees is incomplete, and there's some of it that's inaccurate. So as I look through it, for example, there's no distinction between standing committees and ad hoc committees. There are many ad hoc committees that have disbanded because their mission has been completed, and they remain on the website for historical access and historical record. And maybe there's a different way the website could be structured so people know which committees are active and not. As an example, the Climate Change Task Force was created with a very specific project, and it'll go away when that project's complete. It's really a subcommittee of the larger Sustainable Westborough Committee, which is an ongoing committee or standing committee. And with that, the table highlights committees that are required by town charter. I think there's some additional information that should be included. Some of the committees on that the town has, such as the hold on, where is it here? Such as the Senior Disabled Taxation Aid Committee and the Economic Development Committee. While they're not part of the charter, they are part of our town bylaws, Article 10, because town meeting has accepted certain sections of Massachusetts general law as pro forma bylaws of the town. Additionally, if they look at simplifying some committees, there's not a recognition of committees that are required by Mass General Law, such as the School Pre-K to 3 Building Committee, or by covenant, such as the Walkup Robinson Committee, right? So the Walkup Robinson Fund was a donation. Part of that donation was a stipulation there'd be a committee to oversee the expenditure of those funds. That's not a committee that we could dissolve and combine with another committee. So I think, I know that, this information in the review of the committees identified some areas of consolidation and streamlining, and that's important. I'm not sure if changing the text and adding this additional information would cause them to change any recommendations, but I think it's important that that information be accurate so people have an understanding, why we have so many committees. The last time I looked, which was the December timeframe, I counted roughly 400 volunteer positions across all of the active committees, and at that time, 22 vacancies. And I know that number goes up and down a little bit. We have a few vacancies we noticed tonight that are happening. So along those lines, some clarification. And then there's a more detailed note about an affordable housing committee that's mentioned, and it's used in a couple of different contexts, and those just need to be more specific. Recommendation 3, with aligning town departments' priorities with the strategic plan, I'd like to see mentioned that the town's strategic plan, which was crafted and approved in the fall of 2018, was intended to guide us for a 2-year period. We don't yet have the process in place to update that plan. That's not something, side note, I think we necessarily need outside consulting services for. I think we need a process to identify what's been complete, what's still being worked on, what needs to be started, and then, survey and get guidance from the broader community on what might need to be added to that strategic plan looking forward for the next 2 years. And so, I had some other minor questions in a couple of areas around the human resources function, recreation and public works. I'm not sure if it's out of scope. I'd like to see some discussion about, if not current, potential future consolidation or resource sharing between the town side and the school department. And other organizations, particularly around building and facilities maintenance. The library as a custodian by title, we know that individual also does minor maintenance work. Does that individual in the library have access to the tradespeople at the DPW, or do they have to go to an outside contractor if they need an electrical repair or plumbing work done? And so some discussion along those lines, a little more clarification on those potential opportunities within the town. I want to say it's almost like intra-town regionalization across some of the silos that have existed. If not, specifically changing staffing assignments, now, but at some point in the future, or at least the sharing of resources. And, in some areas they talked about letters of understanding about those shared resources, such as the rec department and DPW as far as athletic fields. Maybe we should have memos of understanding in some other areas of town as well. So that's the high level. All in all, I think it was very comprehensive and took a very strategic view of town process organization, staffing, and roles, and very impressed with the depth. It took a good 3 solid readings to at least to absorb it all. So I'm very impressed.
Ian, you're on mute.
Sorry, I had some tremendous words of wisdom there. So Christy had a comment, and then I had Selectman Emery next on the list.
Yeah, I don't think just to Alan's point about public participation, and just because I don't think I finished my proposed process, would be that once we were to move forward with after the board retreat, once we're moving forward with the prioritized list of recommendations, I think at that point, whichever one you were to pick would certainly require an amount and a level of public input, and also conversation with other impacted boards and committees. So I think that while I think it would be great to get additional public feedback for the report, I think that once we start putting forward very specific implementation ideas, there'll be a good space for that public feedback around these types of recommendations.
Great, thanks. I think, Lee, before I go to you, Al, to your point on a couple of things. Some of the things I think we can do without having to be in the staffing study, some of those discussions and things of, access to tradesmen from DPW for library. Some of those are, and as folks probably know, some things we've done, without a staffing study recommendation, town meeting has voted against, like the custodian tradesman at the library. And likewise, a while back now, but there was work done on specific items around school and town in the past. And unfortunately, it did not gain traction. It's still out there, but there were things, I think some of the things that you addressed there, Alan, were covered there, but it probably does make sense, but it's something that we would want to work with the school committee and the school department to get their agreement. If we want to move for that, to ask them for their to do it and move that forward. I think this one, as we know, schools were specifically not included in the staffing study. So that's why I think for people listening, that why it's, and I know you caveated it's something you'd like to see in the future, but just so for folks know why that's specifically not addressed in here, because it was not within the scope of work.
But and I understand that. So my comments aren't intended to talk about or ask for changes in the recommendations. It's just more in some places the report talks about potential future considerations, and in other places it doesn't. And so more of saying, oh wait, yes, there are some additional places that in the town, in the future, the town may want to consider, so that it's kept as part of the process. Yeah, I'm not saying we start sitting down with the school department now. It's more the content of the report, identifying potential additional spots for future consideration, and future discussion.
Great, thanks. Appreciate it. Selectman Emery.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I agree with everything that Alan said. I'm very concerned about the small numbers. A sample of 10 on some of the community things is just not worth anything as far as I'm concerned. But I have 3 points I wanted to make. The first one is in support with a little more detail of Alan's comments about the committees. On page 21, table 10, the current boards are missing a category of whether or not the boards have statutory responsibility at the local, state, or federal level, which I think was one of the things that Alan was getting at, such as permitting, regulating, enforcing, or adjudicating, and whether or not their responsibility can be delegated or transferred or subjugated to other town entities. So I think they need to add a couple more columns that point out the things that Alan was discussing, plus others. What statutory responsibilities do they have at what level? Is it local town bylaw, local town acceptance of an ordinance or a state law? Or is it an actual state or federal level that we have to adhere to for permitting, regulating, enforcing, or adjudicating? And then it's especially important whether or not those responsibilities can be delegated or transferred. For example, if we combined and had a building, a development office, town development office, community development office with one director, and the zoning board or the conservation commission was reporting up through that, well, that would eventually report up through the town manager, but you can't delegate zoning board of appeals and many of the town planning responsibilities up to the town manager. So I just think we need some real clarification there. And then on page 4, table 2, recommendations with proposed staffing changes estimates costs, but it didn't include estimated savings. So I think if there's any way that they can include, estimated savings of their recommendations, that would be very, very helpful. And then there was no indication, this is my last point, there was no indication at all that they reviewed or analyzed the work and responsibility and meet state mandated goals for reducing our energy consumption, and will require a great deal of strategic planning, action plans, and changes perhaps to town, residential, commercial, and industrial processes, and in some cases regulations to meet goals, and to monitor progress over 10 years. The work, which will not be achievable solely through volunteer efforts and fragmentary involvement of town staff from different departments. There was no indication that they researched the utility of adding a sustainable coordinator and the potential offset of funding to cover that cost, plus bringing funding to the town to manage programs to meet the climate action plan goals. So I think this is a very large project that we've bought into, the climate action plan, with an awful lot of work that we're beginning to understand as our subgroups work on the 4 major components of the action plan. And it cannot be done over the next 5 to 10 years with just volunteer effort and then fragmentary attention from town department heads who are already working as hard as they possibly can. So I think that's a fairly major shortcoming that they didn't look at. And those are my comments. I agree. It's an eloquent report. There's an awful lot in it. It does take, I've only done 3 readings and I still need to do some more. So there's an awful lot in there. And I appreciate that work. Thank you.
Great. Selectman Marshall.
I actually think Sia was before me, Ian, if you don't mind.
Okay. Selectman Hashmi.
I know we're late, so I'm not gonna repeat I agree with the comments Lee and Alan have made. I mean, we paid $100,000 for this report. We really need some guidance on regionalization and about some sort of comment about how we can incorporate, a sustainability coordinator or something. I mean, that was definitely, the regionalization was a big priority, certainly for me, and I think when the board discussed it prior. So I'll just stop there, Ian. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Selectman Marshall.
Syed, that was too fast. So agree with all the comments made. I already had some of those on my list, so I'll hold those for lack of repetition. I do think, I just want to emphasize the point though, that I do think we have to reconcile the staffing study with our strategic plan. Ellen already touched on that. And I don't recall, but as I'm saying this out loud, whether or not the staffing study even talks about the master plan that's underway. I'm totally blanking on that. But if it doesn't, again, kind of looking forward and how does this plan, albeit staffing, address kind of ideas that are going to come out of the master plan? And there needs to be, I think, connectivity there. Alan and Lee have talked about reading this 3 times. I've read it twice, evidently not as dedicated as they are. And it's really, really meaty. And I guess we've heard, actually, I think several of us received emails from the Historical Commission, from Bike and Pedestrian, I believe Sustainable Westborough, provided some comments. Lee, I think you're reading some of those. I think we need to extend the public comment period of this a couple more weeks. I think that the public enjoys hearing the Board of Selectmen's feedback and hearing our thoughts. And I think that often encourages folks to say, geez, that was really interesting. I now want to provide some comment, and however they decide to do it, whether it's to the website that's been made available or individually to Board of Selectmen or directly to our town manager and assistant town manager, it really doesn't matter, but the feedback is important if we want to take this seriously. So I want to, given COVID, I would think that Novak would be understanding of that timeline and the importance of that. And I do believe that the community representation shouldn't be discounted, but I do think that the more information we have, even at a draft level, the better. And it was unclear to me, based on feedback that I've received from the public and which the board has received, as to whether or not all boards and committees were actually asked for their input at the time of the staffing study. Christy, do you recall that?
No, the staff was interviewed. That was part of the process that we approved.
So for example, a staff member that would support a board or committee, they were interviewed. Okay. Yes. So I think that that's kind of where that that kind of the other side of the coin, so to speak, becomes really important, because I think that a lot of committees are now seeing this in draft for the first time. And I worry a little bit about them not, I mean, they can provide comment after. To your point, now is not the time. We're not deciding what's going to be the priority or how we're going to consolidate or not consolidate. That's not the purpose of providing the comments. So we can receive that board and committee feedback after, but I do think that that's pretty absent in this report. So however we choose to do that, I'm open to either way.
Can I respond to that?
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that in looking at a lot of the comments that we've received, I think that, and maybe you've received comments that I haven't seen, but I would say that 90%, if not 100% of the comments we've received are about the recommendations of the report. And so I think if the board's intention is to adjust recommendations, then that's sort of a different conversation and, something that, I think we specifically paid a third party to provide to us. We don't have to take all of their recommendations. There's certainly things that I, as, someone who works in the town hall, don't see us moving forward with. So I think that extending the period for some amount of time, but if the comments we're going to receive are going to be about recommendations that will have public input processes about in the future, I'm just not sure that we're getting the comment that we're looking for right now.
Yeah, fair point, Christy. I think you're spot on. So I appreciate you bringing us sort of back around to that. I just want to, I guess I want to assure the public through what you just shared and through this board that there will be time, and I know you said that at the beginning of this, that there will be time for public through boards and committees or through other venues to engage in this process. Because I just think that that's, critically important. So there's not enough time for me to provide my comments on the draft. I'm going to look forward to changes that we see. I'll send a separate email to Kim with my comments as part of that process, but I don't have to go into detail here.
I see part of the process, and then I'll stop, is that, this board has done a lot of great work with joint meetings, bringing committees, boards and committees together in ways that we haven't previously to discuss specific issues. And so, certainly if we're, for example, talking about, the community development recommendation, there are multiple boards and committees that I would expect this board would want to meet with and have really good discussion about with. So that's something that I've asked department heads to convey to the boards and committees that they're supporting, because I know that that's something that will be part of your process.
Thank you for restating that.
I don't have much to say because going last and said, I do think that one, Shelby, thanks for putting that out. I think if we extend this, say another week or 2 weeks, at some point we have to come to an end. So a week or 2 weeks, I think, is fine. It is meaty, I think, for people, getting through it in these days when people are at home too, if they're reading it online, or it's a lot to print out in terms of its volume too. I do look at, though, and I think, highlighting some of the stuff that Christy said is, I think that this is, to me, is what we did here is had an independent group come in, look at materials, look at websites, whatever, albeit, some things I don't think they picked up on in terms of committee. So I think we all have echoed that. But I think what they did is give us, thoughts and ideas and things that they bring from best practice of doing this in other communities, really probably across the country, I think. Some of it are things that will say, that's nice, but that's not Westborough. Some things will say, hey, that's a great idea, but we should take that a step further. Or maybe we're going to tweak it somewhat because it just gave us that idea to tweak it something else. And that's why I think the robustness that I think Christy talked about and the public input that we'll get through kind of prioritization, implementation, tweaking. I mean, it's not, and we've talked about this many times, this is not something that we look at once, okay, here's a list and let's go implement it. It's going to be iterations and time. And I think we've already said as a board, and just for the public as they hear this, so we've kind of made a commitment that we're going to be working on this thing, but we're not, making recommendations, especially in the time that we are now where we're making budget cuts, that we're going to be making budget additions as implementation, but it's stuff that we will plan for as we should. And I do echo what folks have said in strategic planning. I think that's important. I guess the one thing, just the master plan piece, I think, the problem is we have simultaneous things going on. So trying to get the staffing study to incorporate the master plan where the master plan still has a long way to go is kind of difficult. But I think, so I guess I don't know if others have comment section. I wasn't kind of following what we want.
Well, I just, yeah, I mean, I think I just found it interesting, and again, maybe I missed it, that there wasn't even a reference to the town is undertaking this, and that will even a statement of that will have to be factored in as, you know, themes, concepts come out of that, and how that affects organizational structure, staffing needs, purchase of technology. I didn't mention, I love their data-driven kind of decision-making and performance management concepts in here. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not expecting them to sort of say, well, master plan is sort of doing this, and this is how this ties in. I think it just, even an appreciation, I think to Lee's point about sustainability and Syed's, that there was just an absence that was a miss.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think and it goes back, personally, as I think about it is, and I don't have an answer, but we talk about strategic plan, we talk about master plan. Are they not in some ways or completely one and the same? I mean, do you have a master plan, a separate strategic plan? There seems to be a ton of overlap. And maybe that's what our next strategic plan update is really reflecting on what comes out of the master plan and that driving, you know, or being the strategic plan. I guess that's something to consider. I haven't articulated.
We know that the master plan is different in its intent than the strategic plan, but there's, to Lee's point, there's no question that they're part of the fabric of each other. So, you know, you can't have a strategic plan update, which I totally agree with Alan that we've got to do, and we can, I think, do that with some guidance, as opposed to having a consultant come in to run it. But, you know, we can't, and I know you're not saying to do this, Ian, you know, we don't want to be like, oh, that master plan thing is over here, and we're going to just, you know, think strategic plan today and staffing plan tomorrow. So I mean, there's a lot here. I just think we need to be cognizant of all the moving pieces and recognize that there's not going to be a one right time to maybe jump in and make a decision in certain areas. We've got to move forward with some of the recommendations ultimately, I think. You know, we want to do that sooner than later, but we really need to be thinking long-term planning with visibility to all of those plans that we've invested in. That's all.
Yep. No, thank you. I agree. Other comments? Or I think for other things that people have said, let me look to the committee. Another week? Do we want?
A week is reasonable. 2 is probably extensive.
Yeah, so let's go out another week, and that quite honestly gives all of us time, if we haven't gotten stuff to Kim, which I am one that still is working through comments on this, but to get those to get filtered through as well. So
We'll give Lee and Alan superstar awards.
Thank you.
I heard that Alan's is double the size of what came out in the study. So the 150 now, he put 300 pages in terms of his.
No, not at all.
It's called Alan Edinburgh's War and Peace.
Oh man, tough crowd.
Okay, I think this was helpful. So, Christy,
you joke. Someone's going to ask for that under open records law.
I know.
Yeah, Alan, I mean,
joke.
Ian, can I just, for clarification, Christy, if you could, so department heads were asked to provide their comments on this draft as well, right?
Yes. So prior to it coming to the board, we asked department heads to take a look at their sections, not provide us necessarily feedback on recommendations at this point, but to just make sure that they felt that their departments were appropriately represented in the report. That's all.
Okay, and were their comments were then incorporated by Novak before what's before us?
Yeah, and yes, to be clear, it didn't change any recommendations. It was just very much if you know.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I just want to.
No, thank you. I wasn't so many rounds of drafts and comments. Thank you.
We've also continued, and Kim can speak to this, but we continue to receive, feedback from department heads that will equally be sent to Novak.
Great.
Great. Kim, anything else to add from your side in terms of give you the opportunity because we've all spoken?
No, I think it's all been said.
Okay.
No, thank you. I
A big
appreciate
sigh of relief.
Yeah. No, this is great. I mean, this is such, I mean, I really do think, and I think everyone's echoed it. I mean, there's a ton of information in here and not surprising, there's things that are changes or corrections or gaps that we want addressed. I do think it's once it's done and accepted in the final report, there'll be things that we will be talking about that aren't in the report and as things move forward. But I do think it, to me personally, and hopefully to folks in the community when they look at it, and it sounds like to the board here, that there's a ton of stuff and really some good ideas. And I think I said it at the meeting 2 weeks ago, some that just said, made me slap up my side of my head and say, that seems so logical and simple. And why haven't I or we thought of that before? So I think there's a ton of value. And
if we had come out with a nice glossy, kind of report and said, we're doing most everything well, right? I mean, it would not have been worth any of it. So I think that I don't want the public to feel like the board is critical of the report. I think we're taking kind of a hard look at this to provide critical feedback and input, but I think the grading, if you will, the feedback that they gave to us is, some of it's kind of hard to read because you go, wow, to Ian's point, like, why haven't we done that? Or why aren't we doing this? And that's okay. Like, I'm okay with the report. I just it's like, where do we go from here?
Yep. Thank you, Shelby. Great. So I'm going to move us on just in time. Important thing, as we heard earlier tonight, as we move forward with town meeting for June 20th. The next thing on our agenda is discussion vote for fiscal year 2021 budget and warrant articles. Christy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So I'm going to start with the budget. You've heard our presentations about the budget, most recently with your joint meeting with the Advisory Finance Committee. Overall, we've taken a 4.5% budget increase and we have cut it down to a 2.2% budget increase. So you received this afternoon the most recent budget numbers, and I think the only changes between this and what you had in your packet is the new town moderator budget, which removes the $250, and then also the new school budget, which the school committee has not voted on their new budget number yet, but we adjusted the number based on what Superintendent Bach put forward at the Advisory Finance Committee meeting. So that was the $330,000 reduction. So I can put that, I can put the budget that I sent you today, the most recent budget, up on the screen. And then if you have questions, we can talk about them, or I know typically you vote them all at once.
Yeah, that'd be great, Christy, if you want to do that. So this is, as you say, this is what we're going to go through first is budget. We'll go through and I guess typically in the way we did this earlier this year. So this is kind of like a broken record, I guess, but read through. If anybody has any comments or questions, something they want to discuss, we will kind of put a star to that and come back. Otherwise, we'll vote or take a motion to approve those unquestioned budgets as presented.
So I don't know if you want me to just read through them, or if you want to read.
Why don't you read through, and instead of me going through it again, I'm going to let you speak tonight. And then for us as board members, if you want to call out anything, let's do it that way.
Can I just ask so school committee is scheduled to vote tomorrow, and then AFC meets again when, please?
Thursday.
Thursday, thank you.
So the town moderator budget, we've removed entirely, so it's a 0. The Board of Selectmen town manager budget, we have a total increase of $30,044. Sorry. Finance committee, just trying to figure out which ones. Sorry, do you want me to just read the totals, Ian?
Sure.
Okay, so town moderator, 0. Board of Selectmen town manager, 494,651. Finance committee, 5,831. Finance director, 201,184. Assessors, 285,078. Treasurer collector, 295,338. Legal, 102,500. Information technology, 574,402. Communications, 54,609. Central purchasing, 85,140. Town clerk, 256,884. Election and registration, 81,600. Conservation Commission, 140,624. Planning Department, 165,305. Board of Appeals, $6,946. Economic Development, $4,100. Buildings and Grounds, $418,185. Insurance, $13,250,874. Police Department, $3,882,416. Fire Department ambulance, $5,058,281. Building Commissioner, $423,710. Weights and Measures, $2,650. Animal Control, $62,494. Assabet Regional Vocational School, $778,313. Department of Public Works, $2,592,649. DPW Snow and Ice, $673,636. Electricity, $304,965. Landfill, $691,315. Health Department, $322,567. Council on Aging, $352,174. Youth Commission, $230,401. Veteran Services, $98,078. Trustees of Soldiers Memorial, $2,800. Library, $1,168,736. Recreation, $199,662. Cultural Council, $4,500. Historical Commission, $14,008. Debt, $11,807,825. Country Club Enterprise, $490,459. Sewer Enterprise, $1,865,442. Wastewater Treatment Plant, $5,161,832. Water Enterprise, $4,045,303. And then for the Westborough Public Schools, it's $54,375,994.
I have a question on snow and ice.
Okay.
That's Emery.
Right. Snow and ice. Any other thing from any board members? Any other budgets questions?
A quick question: is animal control net of the reimbursement we get or contribution from the other towns, or is that the gross amount and the monies we receive from other towns are on the revenue side?
The latter. So we have to budget the full amount.
Okay, just a clarification. Thank you.
Just similar to wastewater treatment as well. I think we do. We budget and then get revenue that comes from Shrewsbury and Hopkinton. Lee, do you want us to vote, or do you want to ask your question on snow and ice?
I can ask my question, and then I may say, don't worry about it.
Okay.
Okay. The salary and wages, I'm assuming, are because you have to spread all the DPW expenses across the different things that they do. The expenses, though, the 484,000, I'm assuming are mostly having to do with what it costs for snow removal. And I'm just wondering if this is a good year, although I know in the past we haven't wanted to underfund that in the budget. But because we've had such mild winters for quite a while now, is this a time where it would be safe to, where we need $200,000 here or there, to drop some of that expense budget, knowing that if we end up having to spend it, then we have to go back and get it out of some other, we do it through a different mechanism. What do you think, Christy?
So snow and ice is something that we can deficit spend because winters are so unpredictable. But if we cut the snow and ice budget, then we can't deficit spend in the following year.
Okay.
So that's the risk that we would run if we were to cut it. But it's certainly, go ahead, sorry.
I'd forgotten that about
Yeah.
the deficit spend.
Yeah. So Lee, are you okay then with, I think that is a,
So if we took say we took 100,000 or 150 out of it, Christy, what do you think the risk is? If we can't deficit spend, that means we can't do the work that we're supposed to do because we can't spend the money, or what actually happens?
It would depend on the weather. So if we had a really bad winter and we had to deficit spend, I mean, certainly we could go to the Finance Committee Reserve Fund, but if we were to exhaust that, we could have a problem. I think at this point, maybe that's a discussion we could have for the October town meeting, but I think that because of all the other cuts that we've made, we maybe would want to leave that alone just based on the risk.
Well, the risk is that we'd have to go to the Finance Committee.
But if the Finance Committee didn't have the funds to fully cover whatever snow events we had, then that's a bigger risk.
we might need a special town meeting to fund it.
I see. Okay,
raise
that's okay.
taxes.
All right. Okay.
I think the deficit spending is the key there in the formula to look at the average of past years.
I'm okay with that then.
Okay. So can I have a motion then to approve, or recommend to town meeting approval of the budgets as presented? And again, to note that the school department is, pending their vote, so we should know that. And if it changes, we would just want to revote that. But I think this is the indication we have at this point.
So
I move that we approve the budget as presented.
second.
Okay, other comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor, roll call vote. Selectman Edinburgh,
Yes.
Selectman Emery,
Yes.
Selectman Hashmi,
Yes.
Selectman Marshall,
Yes.
and Selectman Johnson, yes. So 5-0. Okay, so next, where do you want to go, Christy? The warrant, and do you want to go through passing over, or how do you want to handle that?
Yeah, I'll just pull up that spreadsheet that I put in your packet. I also have the draft motions. Hang on. Just trying to find the document to put up on the screen. So I think John Arnold had talked about this earlier, but the proposal that John's working with is to potentially take the articles that we are intending to pass over out of order, and then potentially move to pass them all over in the beginning of the meeting.
You kind of vote that as a block.
Right.
I think was a suggestion of Selectman Edinburgh. Thank you for that, Alan.
So this is what was in your packet, and this is what I showed you before when we met with the Finance Committee. But everything in blue is intended to be put before the upcoming town meeting. Everything in white is intended to pass over. I believe you voted on these articles previously, so I don't know how you want to handle it. If you want to just support the motions to pass over.
I think we could keep it simple because we've done this a couple times on camera.
Yeah. So I would say to Christy's point, if someone wants to make a motion to support the motion to pass over articles, and then we can talk about that, and then we'll go back if there's any other changes. But otherwise, the other ones would stand as voted already.
And just so the viewing public understands, we don't mean to pass over for good. We're saying we're really postponing them till October.
Correct.
So
yeah, most of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I move to support passing over the warrant articles as presented.
I second that, Emery.
Okay. Discussion or questions on any specific ones or any questions in general?
Christy, can you just scroll up? I know it's hard to see with seeing faces as well as feel like those. Thank you.
So just while you're looking at that, your previous vote was to support all of the articles 1 through 26, 5-0.
And that was remind me again on the citizens, but so we voted on this.
Yeah, so you voted to postpone taking action on Article 27 until the town meeting. I have still not seen a motion for that article. So,
Right, so we'd still hold off on that one then.
Yep.
Okay, Shelby, any questions?
Yeah, well, just I'm looking at the Lake Chauncey treatment. I don't have my notes in front of me. I apologize. I felt like we were waiting on more information on that in terms of whether or not we were actually going to pass over that or do any treatment.
Well, I thought the recreation department was going to cover that from their revolving fund.
Yeah, I guess I just, in my mind, I see Passover meaning we're not going to do it, but you're exactly right, Ian. I thought that there was.
So there was discussion about them paying for it out of the revolving fund, and now that they won't be opening the beach, I guess we should follow up on that discussion with them.
Yeah.
Is it absolutely set in stone that they won't be opening the beach, or is it still contingent a little bit on how things go?
They've indicated that they're closing the beach. I mean, they typically would hire lifeguards.
That's right. The whole lifeguard issue too. Okay. Yeah. Yep.
Right. And I'm happy to revisit the discussion on whether or not Lake Chauncey gets treated this year, but just remind the board that even though the beach is closed, there are people still going in the water.
Right.
People are still allowing their pets in the water, and the boat ramp is controlled by the state.
Right.
So there could be people out on boats in the water, and the treatment is related to a health issue. So,
But we don't have a chance to correct that before October if we pass over it now. So.
No, well, the rec department had looked at being able to pay for it out of the revolving fund, so that we wouldn't need to raise and appropriate.
But Christy, did you just say they're not going to be able to do that out of their?
No, I just said that I would follow up. So I mean, I can certainly follow up with Jen, and you can hold that article. You can vote it next week.
I would recommend we hold it.
Can I make a suggestion? The Board of Health will be meeting next Tuesday. Maybe we can vote on it. I'm sure they're going to be interested. We were kind of involved with it, so I think it may be helpful to just have the board present when Jen discusses this next week. That would be my suggestion.
Well, we might not even need a discussion if we find that they're just going to pay for it out of the revolving fund. So.
Oh, okay.
Christy, if nothing else, could we just put it, maybe it's over to the right and I can't see it, given the view of how much that amount, I see it was 15,000. I'm looking at the warrant.
It was 15,000.
Yeah. And I know it's not in the October column because we wouldn't be doing it in October, but maybe you just put that in there.
Helpful note I have right here. I know it was less, obviously less than that because it was fewer months. So 15,000 was what was in the warrant, and it was a raise and appropriate, so it would impact the tax rate.
Tax rate, yep. Okay, thank you for the clarification. That was the only one that I was.
No, I think it's a good one because I mean, if I remember though, this is one that this was really to try to alleviate. This is new treatment, so not the treatment that we've done every year for algae, and this was for the bloom, and it was a treatment to try to protect us from having to close the beach like we did last year. If the beach is closed, and I understand that folks are using it, and it was very well populated over the past weekend and days. But I guess like question would be, and maybe this is a Board of Health question to Syed's point, is if we had the bloom, I think we would still post that that the area's closed or put signage up about the bloom. But I guess the question is, do we spend the money if it's for a beach that we're not going to open?
Well, yeah, I think I mean, I'm not sure what the level of testing would be also if the beach isn't open. So I think that we should, rather than try to guess, I think we should probably just wait for an answer as to whether or not the recreation revolving account is going to cover it, and if not, whether or not the board wants to keep it on the town meeting warrant, because the motion can change up until the town meeting. So you would just be referenced in the book as not having voted on this article, because the R&R will be published before your next meeting.
Okay.
That sounds good.
So Stila, it would be, because Stila does this with Jody, it would be, so this article and then also the citizens petition, the Board of Selectmen will vote on at town meeting.
Can I also just make a suggestion that I really do think it may be helpful to have a discussion with, I don't remember, just maybe helpful to have a discussion with the Board of Health, with the other members present, and get their feedback to help inform your decision as we move forward. That would be I would urge that.
I agree.
Okay, we can do that next week.
And we can vote on it, and we can potentially get the Board of Health to vote on it. I think if I remember, the Board of Health voted on it, but I'm not sure, and Steve would probably know better than me.
Yeah. So I now that we talked about it, I don't remember, did we have a motion? I think we did we not?
Alan didn't quite make it as a motion, I think. I was saying that I think we should hold on this.
Right.
So I move that we not vote on the Lake Chauncey treatment, but vote on the rest of the warrant article Passover motions.
And I would accept that, yes.
Okay. So Celia, you got that?
Yep, I got it.
Perfect. Okay, any further discussion on that? Okay, roll call vote. Selectman Marshall?
Marshall, yes.
Selectman Hashmi?
Yes.
Selectman Emery?
Yes.
Selectman Edinburgh?
Yes.
And Selectman Johnson, yes.
And just so the board's aware, the amounts have changed. So the purchase of cruisers, most of the cruisers have been pushed to October, but there's still a $65,000 request. The kindergarten article has been reduced to $200,000, though we may hear more about that tomorrow night. And then the CSX article is still showing here as $53,957. But if you look at the draft motions I sent out, that's actually been reduced down to $31,000. So you would still be shown as being in support of the article. I just wanted to make you aware of some of the changes.
And Christy, for 8M, the police cruisers, how many does that represent?
I believe it's one.
That's one cruiser.
That's what I recall. I just wanted to make sense. I presume, given the cost of it and the cost of a cruiser, but
yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So I think that covers us on the warrant.
Yep. Great.
Anything else? No, so I think as a result of the school committee, as Christy said, there is a potential that free cash, 200,000 that's in there, our draw on free cash would be reduced if that is determined to be eliminated, but that's a vote tomorrow night that the school committee will be discussing. Okay, Christy, anything else on budget or warrant?
No, I don't have anything else. I can't thank, the staff and the department heads enough. It's been a long, but also very quick process. So, and it's been a lot of work. So, I just really appreciate all their work on it.
Great. I think as you put in our thing that we will need another meeting on to finalize the free cash amount that we want to use.
Yeah. So actually, thanks for bringing that up. I should have said that. So right now, if you look at the draft motions, let me stop sharing this. If given the number that the school department put up at the AFC meeting, we would be looking at using $750,000 in free cash for operations.
Absolutely. I'm proud of the fact that we're keeping the increase consistent with what was voted prior to COVID-19. So, thank you, everyone. That.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's unbelievable work. I mean, I know that in a short period of time now we have to get ready for town meeting. So, Christy, if there's anything I don't know the board can help with or stay out of the way for, maybe that's better.
I was thinking that, Shelby. Maybe we stay out of the way.
Please let us know. In any way, because I know there's a lot to do. And I know John Arnold joined us again. So thanks, John, for hanging in there.
I don't know if I missed anything. Did anybody need any discussion or need to hear anything about my idea to do a single motion to pass over at the beginning?
Nope, we talked about that, and that's kind of how we voted, with the understanding that the motion, that basically two motions, one to move those
forward,
and then to vote them as a block. We talked about tonight. Yep.
That's the fastest way to do it, and that way we don't have to break the rhythm. We get going and keep on coming back. And that looks like it'll pass muster. And just if the list, I'm going to start making my notebook. If the list of things that you have proposed to pass over changes, just let me know, and I'm seeing the finance committee. I think I came in just in time to hear that you're holding off on the restocking one. So I'm just going to try to keep that list alive. And my intention would be, as soon as I finish my preamble, where typically Joe and then I used to say, are there anything before we get going, I would entertain a motion from the selectmen to do that both motions to move forward and pass it.
Yeah, and John, it wasn't the restocking; it was the Lake Chauncey treatment. Was the one we.
I couldn't understand anything John said. As long as everybody else can, that's fine. He doesn't have to repeat anything.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I moved my laptop and I think my microphone's further away.
Yeah, really, I did hear it. It did cover everything that we talked about already. So
Thank you. Good.
Thank you, John. Okay, so any interdepartmental transfers tonight? I didn't see anything, Kristen.
No, we don't have anything.
Okay, stuff on that, Adam. So we'll move forward to the town manager's report.
Yep. So for the municipal department reopening, I had attached, and I just got this to you today, but I attached a new communication that I'm actually going to post on the website following this meeting that just talks about the operations of the town at this point. But what I wanted people to know is that we have brought people, starting Monday, we brought people back into the buildings for the normal hours on an alternating schedule. And, while you've all been able to access us by phone, we will physically be in the buildings now. They are still closed to the public. So if there is a need to meet with a department in person, that would be by appointment only, and it would take place in the vestibule of the municipal buildings, and people would be required to wear masks. And I just want to thank Kim and Dr. Ehrlich for holding the mandatory trainings with our staff last week that were required by the state to hold before we came back into the buildings. The restaurant reopenings we already talked about. We consider some tonight and we'll do more on Thursday. I wanted to let the board know that I received a call from a concerned resident regarding the presence of the cotton gin on the town seal. So this resident will be coming before the board at your next meeting to discuss this concern. Just for your information, under Mass General Law, a town seal can only be changed by a vote of town meeting. And so I did explain the process to her, and she understood that wouldn't be able to happen at this point until the October town meeting. The task force has been working on the bell ringing moment of silence, which will take place on June 14th. We have this great flyer that was done by Westborough Connects that's out there, but there'll be a full minute of bell ringing at 4:30, a moment of silence at 4:31, and then another full minute of bell ringing at 4:32. So the town hall will obviously participate, as will other places of worship downtown that have bells. And then one thing that I had left off my town manager report that I wanted to let you know is that this week I've appointed the Affordable Housing Working Group so that they can start their work. So that is Selectman Edinburgh as your representative, Ed Bain, Steve Durrett, Amy Dwyer, Jennifer Giuliano, Valeria Moya, and Hank Roush are on that committee. And then we have updates from the Department of Public Works, who wants to highlight the Assistant DPW Director, Derek Sari, for completion of a multi-year effort to improve protection of the town's reservoir. And then also Lisa Elaine for fulfilling the duties of both the town engineer and assistant town engineer since August of 2019. That has been the assistant town engineer position has been a very difficult position to fill. And so, as the board is aware, that's not one of the positions that we have frozen in terms of hiring, because we want to be prepared for a candidate. But please, if you know anyone that is interested and qualified, we're looking. And then the DPW also applied for a $42,000 grant from the Mass Division of Ecological Restoration, which is a fund data collection and analysis for future culvert replacement project on Bowman Lane. So that'll be announced in September. And then the Conservation Department also provided an update that that they continue to work, that they operate under the governor's state of emergency order related to the way that permits are working at this point. Let's see, trying to skim here. Permits that were in play as of the start of the state of emergency, namely the Ridings 2 subdivision, which and a single family housing project at 171 Ruggles, are being acted upon. And then there have been 2 wetlands violations that the commission was working on. Of note, in May, the Conservation Commission denied a minor project permit for the MBTA to do tree and vegetation clearing in advance of a proposed parking lot expansion, but they requested that they come back to bring back the entire proposal. So that's something that we've talked about at this board as well. And then they have been working on the COVID-19 safety signage on the conservation trails, which was all up by Friday, June 5th.
Wow, good.
Great. Thank you, Christy. Okay, issues and correspondence of the Selectmen, Selectman Emery.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll let somebody else speak to the program on Sunday. I did attend it. It was wonderful. A really large turnout and a very good effort. And I think all of us privileged white people realize we've got an awful lot of work to do. And one of the things I think that's most important is to start getting much more aware of the history of the United States and white supremacy from 400 years ago. So reading things, listening to people, watching things, watching movies. All the Spike Lee movies are listed in the New York Times. There's a wonderful book list that they gave us to read about Black writers, so that you can reference those. And I'm sure Maureen Ambrosino will start to have those things more available at the library. But it was a wonderful meeting, and I think our police presence was nicely done. I wish they'd been asked if they could speak, because I think they would have said something very supportive. But I wasn't in charge of who got invited to speak, but they did have a nice quiet presence, and I appreciated that. And then I was wondering on the town bell ringing, if we as a board would like to be present in front of the town hall on the front steps for that period of time, slightly before the bells ring, during it, and after, just to show our respects. And there may be other people that gather, and I think if other people gathered, it would look funny if we weren't there. So I was wondering if people might be available to do that. I don't know if Christy would want to do that, or anybody else. And do you know who's going to actually ring the bell, Christy, at the town hall? Is it Jim?
Jim Stewart.
Jim
Yeah.
Stewart? Okay, good. All right.
That's a great idea.
Okay, so we can all plan to be there. Thank you. And that's all I had to say. Ian, thank you so much.
Thank you. Selectman Edinburgh.
I'll echo Lee's comments about the vigil. I think the personal stories, the children's poetry, the words of inspiration were all incredibly moving and thoughtful and challenging to how we all see ourselves and our roles. And for us here on the Board of Selectmen, our roles as individual, members of society and the community, but also in our roles as leaders and officials of the community as well, in how we act. And I think I also marvel that that event was the initiation. Was initiated by a resident who got some help, but really was able to pull together someone. I think it speaks to the importance of the issue and the interest of the community, given the turnout. With that in mind and thinking about what we can do, a number of people have asked me, well, who can I talk to who's a town official about this stuff? I want to remind everyone that the Selectmen as a board has an email address. We all have personally published our email addresses as well. I will speak for myself that if you want to speak to someone in a role of town government about any issues or concerns you have, my ears are open. Best way to contact me is by email, when we can schedule a time to talk by phone or physically distant, but in person as appropriate. And one of the questions I've received several times is, well, what does the town have in place? And the town has a committee on diversity and inclusion. Looking at the agenda and minutes, I know that last fall that committee started to look at its mission and really understand it and the scope of it. And I think that is a subject for a future meeting, but not too far in the future. It might be worthwhile and even to gather some community input on what that committee might look like. I know historically it's been very much about diversifying the employee base, encouraging a more diverse participation in town boards and committees, and making sure that town services are accessible to the most diverse breadth of our citizenry and our residents as possible. I think there's other things that committee could evolve and be involved with, and that requires some thoughtful introspection and discussion and more community input. And so I think I know right now we're in mega crunch for town meeting in the next week and a half, but hopefully shortly thereafter we'd have a time to, as a board, have that discussion and talk about that committee and possibly rethink its mission and how it's constituted to increase resident and citizen participation. On a separate note, I'm also inspired as people thought about the vigil on Sunday, and you think about underlying issues that affect our community. One of them is affordable housing. And so I am moved that several people have reached out for how they can get involved in affordable housing, and I've responded to all of those when we talk to them individually, but also know we learned today that a member of the Westborough Housing Authority, actually the member where the Board of Selectmen made the appointment on behalf of the governor's office, pursuant to Chapter 121B, Section 5 of Mass General Law. That individual, for a number of personal reasons, has moved out of town and is no longer a resident. And so that is an effective resignation, and we now have an open seat on the Westborough Housing Authority that needs to be filled. Since this board made that appointment, we have the authority to make a subsequent appointment. We do not need to wait another 128 days to see if the state will act. So we can act as soon as we have viable candidates or candidates who are interested in filling that seat. And so if you have an interest in serving and you want to learn more, contact me. I can put you in touch with members of the Housing Authority Board and the executive director to learn more as well. But please contact us or the town the town manager's office with a note of interest. and we can help you understand the role and decide if you want to submit your name. So thank you. And that is all I have this evening. Thank you.
Great. Selectman Hashmi.
So, Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yep.
So I have a bunch of stuff. So I know it's late, but I hope you'll just bear with me. It's been a while since I've been this wordy, but the times I think called for it. I think one of the, again, I think one of the things that we need to discuss as a board is whether we want to release. We have since Memorial Day till now, we have not released any sort of statement, and I think it may be helpful as a board, coming from the board, that we release a statement reaffirming the values that are already enumerated in our mission statement. Granted, they're there, but I think it would be helpful to release a statement along those lines that the Board of Selectmen is deeply committed to the values that we set in our strategic plan. So I would suggest that to the board, that we release, a statement along those lines. The other is, granted, you can do all the
Sorry,
meetings.
could you speak up a bit? I may be the only one. Thank you.
Can you hear me now, Shelby?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay. The second is, if granted, you can read all the books, but if you really want to start, far too often there are voices in the town that quite frequently are ignored, sidelined, or marginalized. And one of those ways that you can incorporate those voices is, for instance, in certain committees. I'm particularly, and I raised this when the master plan committee was here last time, but I think in light of the urgency of this, I think it would be helpful from the Board of Selectmen that we send a letter to the planning board, which is in charge of the master plan committee, and say, hey, you have all these businesses in there, but you have, last time I checked, on that master plan committee, there's not one person who rents a home in Westborough. So I think if we at least made that effort, if we made that commitment, I think that would also go a long ways to, widening, this is, the master plan committee is going to be looking at the master plan for 15 to 20 years. And if you are really committed to, being inclusive, being diverse, and incorporating new ideas, new perspective, that is how you're going to get there. So that's a suggestion. If the board wants to, write a letter to the planning board, or consider making a statement along those lines. The third is a much more painful topic, because I personally have very good relations with the Westborough Police Department. They do a spectacularly great job. I see them everywhere, and anytime I meet them, they are personally doing wonderful things. However, this moment is making us all look at police practices. So, for instance, and I'll just give you a couple of examples. In Cambridge, the Cambridge Police Department made an order that if you don't mind, I'll just read it. All sworn members of the Cambridge Police Department present at any scene where physical force is being applied to either stop or attempt to stop any member of the department where force is being unreasonably applied or no longer required. The second thing is, in Los Angeles, they have banned the use of carotid restraints. The third is, I think there are some police officers that go to, warrior training. Now, that may be, the question is that making police into soldiers, and is that contributing to this? So I don't know if it's worthwhile. I can send you the list if you want of the things that I came across. Is it worthwhile having a discussion with the police chief? Because first, our police do a great job. They are, they are part in the community, and we just talked about them. But in light of the increased scrutiny, it may be helpful to say, hey, if we are serious, these are steps that we are taking, or maybe they're not needed to be taken because they're already part of our policies. So I say that to the board to say, hey, is this something that you want to discuss with the police? the last thing that this is all of everything that I have discussed today is so depressing. I just thought I should end with at least some sort of good note. Is that the parade this weekend was absolutely incredible, and so someone reached out to me afterwards and say, hey, how can we have a July 4th fireworks this year? So I reached out to Roberta, and we'll see if we can pan that, if that can happen or not. If it can happen, I hope we can get the board's support on that. I'll stop there, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Can I'm sorry. I think sometimes during issues and correspondence, a lot of things are brought up that are probably most appropriately agenda items. And so I think all of the things actually that Syed brought up, I just want to say sound like agenda items to me. And so would be placed on a future agenda. So I
you
just
want me to just send them to you, Christy? If that would that help?
Fine. I just want to clarify that you can certainly send me agenda items anytime, but I think all of the things or most of the things that you brought up require the board's action, and so those are really agenda item topics that need to go on a future agenda.
Okay.
Right, but I think it's appropriate for Syed to bring them up under issues and correspondence so that they can become agenda items.
Well, I just wanted to be clear that would be their next step.
Right.
No, but thank you, Christy. Selectman Marshall.
Sure. So a couple quick updates, business-wise, if you will. So the EDC, we anticipate that group will be reconvening possibly at the end of June, and then back on a regular schedule in August. Our chair, Bonnie Sullivan, and Kim have been working closely together. So it took a little bit of a hiatus. In some ways, folks might have said, well, why isn't the EDC meeting? And businesses have been kind of halted and all, but it was sort of intentional given all the work that is being done on the town side, and other departments were already submerged in their COVID work to intentionally sort of pause that work of the EDC. So look for an update from that committee toward the end of the month, the beginning of August. I totally agree with, and Alan, you said it well with all the comments about the diversity, what is called now the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. I think it's a group that I am on that. In my experience, it has sort of struggled with its identity, and now more than ever, this creates an opportunity for that. And I know that our Director of Youth and Family Services and Kim, our assistant town manager, are already in conversations about where do we go from here. So I have very high expectations as to next steps, and I think that is an all-inclusive conversation and a committee that needs to be broadened, and there's tremendous opportunity. Christy, all of this kind of discussion about police and all, I think, as I was thinking about the events of Sunday and leading up to that just nationally, it made me think about kind of our own policy and procedure creation and the accreditation process. So at some point, I don't think it's urgent by any means. I think it would be good to have an update from the chief, where that stands. I mean, that just might be honestly in your town manager update, just to kind of let us know. But I think that could spur some further conversation and questions, some of which, Syed brought up.
Right. Yep.
Yep. I want to thank Westborough TV for televising and covering us here and bringing us to all the viewers. And I want to, I want to acknowledge the amazing night that it was. The comments have already been shared, so I'll try to put them on my own words. Sunday was an incredibly powerful night for the town. I know, and I want to acknowledge that there have been some people that have been critical of the police presence that was there, but my view, albeit maybe it is from a privileged view, given my skin color, was that by having assistance from other communities to be present for the town's purpose, it allowed our own Westborough Police Department to be physically present at Bay State, to be part of the conversation, if you will, the presentation, the vigil. And I think that everyone handled themselves in a way that was respectful of that for what the event deemed in its respect. And I think that speaks to the community that we are. I would encourage us to continue to have the difficult discussions that need to take place. Alan and I actually had a really good one earlier today, and I kind of had made a comment and you challenged me, and I was like, really good point. Hadn't looked at it that way. We need to be open to hearing everyone's voice. We're not always going to agree, but we can't make progress toward our future if we don't understand our history, as Lee already said. And I want to thank the town for continuing to deliver incredible services across the board, across all the departments under incredible pressure, and for doing it with grace. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. I said a couple things and said a lot tonight, but one, just a reminder to the folks that the annual town election is coming up. In-person voting this coming Saturday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Memorial Hall at the Town Hall. Hopefully people have taken advantage of the kind of remote voting ahead of time and done that. But for those that want to vote in person, that is coming up this Saturday. And as we talked the following Saturday, we talked a lot about tonight, is annual town meeting, and more information get out there, but hope that people and anyone that wants to can attend. One other thing I wanted to bring up, and I forgot what it was, so bear with me a minute.
Ian, while you're gathering your thoughts, I just want to remind folks that you can't actually, I think in the past we've communicated that you can download a ballot online. You actually can't, just for the public. I think maybe that you can view the ballot, but you actually have to request an absentee ballot by contacting the town clerk's office, and there's some information you need to provide. So
that's a very good point. What you do is you ask for permission to get one. You don't get one.
Yeah,
Right.
you can download a form to ask for permission to get one, but you can't get it online and send it.
Right.
The communication that's gone out has been that you can apply for your ballot online.
Right. So I know we talked about that, but just for point of clarification, because I downloaded it and I said, this doesn't look right.
Yeah, it confused me, and I actually talked to Wendy about it. I didn't know how to do it.
So anyway, but get out there and vote.
Yeah. Sorry, the couple things, and I apologize. One was just in a little different flavor, because I don't want to repeat what others said about this past weekend, but alongside the parade that was held, I just want to commend the groups and the school department for the work they did with the seniors and the memorial walk, that if people go by the high school, you can still see it out there. It's pretty amazing. And then capped off by parade run by our Westborough Spirit Committee, and it's really led by Westborough Spirit's key cheerleader, Roberta Brown, which was just an event that, again, truly speaks to the community. It was just a ton of fun, and from everything I've heard, I mean, the seniors were overwhelmed by it, which is exactly what we wanted. So it was great. And then the one final thing was just, besides the messages that my fellow board members come in, one of the things that I was just really impressed with as a community coming together was we talked a lot about personal responsibility, doing stuff, but I think when you looked at the large crowd, but people took care to socially distance as much as possible. People wore face masks. There was no, again, it's a show of what we want people to continue to remember that. As things start opening it up, that those are still in place. If you're going out to restaurants, for example, which I'm thrilled and was able to attend one of our restaurants last night and eat outdoors, which I love. But the policy is you wear your face mask in, and when you get seated, then you can take it off. But the wait staff is still doing so. Just be conscientious. Follow the rules. But it's just it's for your health, but also everyone else in the community's health. So I appreciate everyone continuing to do that. Great job, Westborough. It's a pleasure and a privilege, I think, that all of us feel for kind of representing this community. But as a community, you do us all proud. So I appreciate that. And with that, we do have a meeting coming up on Thursday. So stay tuned, but we know that we probably have at least one additional license that we'll be extending on that, and hopefully some others. So with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Make that motion.
Second that motion, Emery.
Okay, roll call vote. Selectman Marshall.
Marshall, yes.
Selectman Emery.
Emery, yes.
Selectman Ashby.
Yes, good night.
Selectman Edinburgh.
Yes.
And Selectman Johnson, yes.
Okay, thanks
Thank you,
everybody.
Good night.
Thanks.